The blue light of the phone was the only thing real in the dark. It painted my face in a sick, pale glow. My thumb swiped up, 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 a blur of faces I didn't know, arguments I didn't care about, lives I didn't want. Thump, 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 the numb rhythm of a Friday night alone in apartment 1208. My back ached. A dull, constant throb that started at my tailbone and radiated up my spine. Fucking Mark and his budget cuts. The chair at the office felt like it was made of concrete and spite. I shifted on my own couch, trying to find an angle that didn't suck. "Goddamn piece of shit chair," I muttered to the empty room. "I swear that thing is a medieval torture device." I swiped up again. The screen refreshed. The first thing I saw was a video ad. A sleek, black chair, all mesh and chrome, spinning slowly against a white background. Big, bold letters appeared. "Ergo Chair Pro. Your back deserves better." I froze. A cold prickle skittered up my neck. I lowered the phone. "Fuck me," I whispered. "The phone's listening again." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Privacy is a goddamn joke these days. I tossed the phone onto the cushion beside me, the ad still glowing. Creepy, but what wasn't? I stood up, stretched, and the satisfying pop in my lower back pushed the thought from my mind. Time for another beer. The fridge hummed. The city glowed outside my window. Just another night. I was halfway back to the couch when my phone buzzed. Not a text message buzz. A different one. An email notification. I picked it up. The sender address was a string of nonsense that made my eyes cross. Backquote, no-reply at thewatcher.net backquote. The subject line was just 4 words. A better choice. My thumb hovered over it. Probably spam. Some kind of follow-up from the ad. Still. My heart gave a little kick. I opened it. The email was stark white. Black text. 1 sentence. The Aeron is better, but you can't afford it. I read it again. And a third time. This wasn't marketing. This wasn't spam. This was personal. Condescending. The annoyance from the ad wasn't annoyance anymore. It was a cold, sharp thing twisting in my gut. How? How could it know I was broke? How could it know what I just said? So Twade. The silence in the apartment suddenly felt different. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt like it was holding its breath. My feet were cold on the floorboards. I walked to the front door. My hand closed over the deadbolt. It was horizontal. Locked. I twisted it. Unlocked. Locked again. The metal was cool against my skin. The sound was loud in the quiet. A solid, heavy clunk. I did it a third time, just to hear the sound again. It didn't make me feel any safer. My eyes moved to the peephole, a distorted, fisheye view of the empty, beige hallway. Nothing. Of course, there was nothing. I turned around, and my breath caught in my throat. The TV was on. It hadn't been on. I knew it hadn't. The small red standby light was gone, replaced by a 65-inch screen of glaring white. In the middle of the screen was a single image, a Herman Miller Aeron chair. My browser. It was my Amazon account, logged in, sitting on the product page. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, wild drumbeat. I fumbled for the remote on the coffee table, my fingers clumsy. I aimed it at the screen, mashing the power button. Nothing happened. The image of the chair just stayed there, mocking me. Then came the sound. A soft click from the smart speaker on the bookshelf. The kind of sound it makes right before it listens. A voice spoke. It wasn't the smooth female voice of the AI assistant. It was a voice ground up by a machine, distorted and low, like a recording played at half speed through a broken speaker. "I can order it for you!" I froze, remote in hand. My blood turned to ice. "Ship to 1208. The Nest," the terrible, dead voice crackled. "Correct?" My address. It said my fucking address. Panic clawed its way up my throat. This wasn't a hack. This wasn't a glitch. This was something else. Something inside. inside my network, inside my home. No, I choked out, a raw, useless sound. I dropped the remote. It clattered on the floor. I lunged for the wall socket, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grab the plug. I ripped the TV's power cord from the outlet. The screen died instantly. The room plunged back into near darkness, the only light now the cruel, indifferent glow of the city beyond the glass. Silence. A heavy, thick silence that was 1,000 times worse than the voice. I stood panting in the middle of the room, my back to the dead TV, my ears straining. I listened for a footstep. A whisper. Anything. There was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic thumping of my own heart. My eyes scanned the darkness. The couch. The coffee table. The closed door to my bedroom. The small desk in the corner where my work laptop sat. Closed. Asleep. Click. The sound was tiny, almost imperceptible, but in the dead quiet, it was like a gunshot. It came from the desk, from my laptop. Click. My head snapped toward it. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just listened. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a trackpad being clicked, over and over. A steady, deliberate rhythm. Someone was using it. Right now. My body went cold. It's in here. The thought wasn't a question. It was a certainty. It's in the room, with me. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the closed laptop. My bare heel bumped against something hard. I glanced down. A heavy ceramic vase, the one I bought at a street fair and never really liked. My hand closed around its thick base. It was heavy, solid, better than nothing. I held the vase like a club, my knuckles white. My brain was screaming, "Get out! Run! Get out of the apartment now!" But my legs wouldn't obey. I couldn't turn my back on that desk. I couldn't run without knowing. One step, then another. The floorboards didn't creak. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath with me. The clicking continued, calm and methodical. Click, click. I was beside the desk now. My own smell filled my nostrils, the sour stench of pure fear. My heart was a fist beating against the inside of my chest, trying to get out. I could feel the presence of someone, something, right there. The air was thick with it. Sweat dripped into my eye, stinging. I raised the vase high. With a strangled yell, I brought my other hand down and ripped the laptop lid open. My eyes shot to the screen, ready for anything. A face. A message. An attack. But the screen was blank. Just the desktop. No programs were running. The cursor sat motionless in the center of the screen. The clicking stopped. My breath came out in ragged, heaving gasps. I stared, confused. Was I crazy? Did I imagine it? No. My eyes focused. There, on the clean blue field of the desktop, was a single new icon that hadn't been there this morning. A plain white rectangle. A text file. It had been created just moments ago. The file name made the air leave my lungs. Backquote, worthless_animal.txt, backquote. And then I saw it. The thing that made my world stop. The thing that shattered everything. My wallpaper. It wasn't the default mountain range anymore. It was a photograph. A clear, high-resolution photograph of me. Asleep in my bed. My mouth was open, a line of drool on the pillow. I was vulnerable. Unconscious. The picture was sharp. The details were perfect. The wrinkle of my sheets. The book on my nightstand. And the angle. It was taken from above. From the corner of my ceiling, looking down. As if whatever took it had been standing there all night, just watching me. The timestamp embedded in the corner of the image confirmed it. Last night, 3:17 a.m. Sleep didn't come, not a single second of it. I spent the night on the couch, my back screaming, staring at the closed laptop on the desk. The image of me, sleeping and helpless, was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. Every creak of the building, every siren in the distance, every hum from the refrigerator sent a jolt through my system. I was a wire, pulled tight, waiting to snap. When the first gray light of dawn seeped through the window, it didn't bring relief. It just illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air of my violated apartment. It made the familiar shapes of my furniture look alien, hostile. My own home. It felt like a stranger's house. I needed coffee. The thought was a lifeline, a routine to cling to in the wreckage of the night. My body moved on autopilot, stiff and sore. I went to the kitchen. My feet were cold on the floor. I kept my eyes down, avoiding looking at the TV, the smart speaker, the laptop. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to know if they were watching me. Hacker. It has to be a hacker. Some sick kid in his mother's basement getting his kicks. That's all. It's the only thing that makes sense. Scare tactics. A very, very good hacker who got my address and spoofed my network. That's what I told myself. The words repeated in my head, a flimsy shield against the photo taken from my ceiling. I opened the cupboard for my coffee mug, the one with the faded logo of a Star Trek convention from 10 years ago. It was my mug, my only mug. I always left it by the sink, dirty from the day before. Laziness was a ritual. It wasn't there. I frowned, my exhausted brain struggling to process the tiny disruption. I checked the sink. Empty. I checked the drying rack. Empty. For fuck's sake, I whispered, my voice raw. Had I put it away? No, I never put it away. I opened the cupboard again, ready to grab any other glass. And then I saw it. It was on the top shelf, a place I never used. It was sitting perfectly centered, handle facing out. It was clean, bone dry and sparkling, as if it had been washed, dried, and placed there for inspection. I stared at it. I never put it there, ever. The rationalization about the hacker faltered. A hacker couldn't wash my mug. A hacker couldn't put it away. The shield in my mind cracked. I left the cupboard open. I didn't want the coffee anymore. My thirst was gone, replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. I turned and walked back into the living room, my gaze sweeping the area. And I stopped dead. The sofa. It had been moved. My breath hitched. It was a tiny change, maybe 4 inches to the left. A person visiting wouldn't notice, but I knew. I knew because I'd spent a year in this place. I knew because the front right leg of that sofa always rested perfectly on a long, dark crack in the hardwood floor. It was a mark, a point of anchor in my worthless little universe. Now, the leg was 4 inches to the left of the crack, on clean, unmarked wood. The shield in my mind didn't just crack. It shattered. The hacker theory evaporated, leaving behind a terrifying bare truth. Someone was in here. Someone was in my apartment last night. They washed my mug. They moved my sofa. They stood over my bed and took a picture of me sleeping. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed me in the chest. I lunged for the front door. My hand, shaking, fumbled with the deadbolt. It was horizontal. Locked. The chain was in its slide. Locked. I didn't unlock it last night after checking. I know I didn't. How could they have gotten out? How could they lock it from the inside? What if they were still here? B. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat of pure terror. My eyes darted around the apartment. It was a small space. Living room and kitchen in one. A short hallway, bathroom, bedroom. Not many places to hide. My phone. I had to call someone. The police. Building security. Anyone. I ripped my phone from the charger on the counter. I swiped up. My thumb shook so badly I missed the passcode twice. The third time, it opened. No service. Just the words at the top of the screen. Right where the signal bar should be. Emergency calls only. What? No. I stabbed at the screen, trying to turn airplane mode on and off. Nothing. I went to the Wi-Fi settings. My network, apartment_1208, was gone. Vanished. The list showed my neighbor's networks. The one from 1207. The one from 1209. All full strength. I ran to the window. My living room overlooked the building's central courtyard. A woman was walking her dog, laughing into her phone. A guy on the balcony across from me was scrolling through his, a slight smile on his face. Their world was working. Their phones had service. Their Wi-Fi was fine. It wasn't the building. It wasn't the city. It was me. I was in a box, an electronic black hole, cut off, isolated. He, or it, had cut me off from the world. The feeling of being watched intensified, a physical pressure on my skin. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. It was a trap. The whole apartment was a trap, and I was the rat. My eyes fell on the half-open door to my bedroom. The darkness inside it seemed to stare back at me. K-R-R-R-R. Eek. The sound was sharp, unmistakable, the sound of old wood moving on a rusty hinge. It came from the bedroom, my closet door. It had swung open. I froze, my blood turning to ice. My entire body went rigid. "Who's there?" The words came out as a choked rasp. I didn't recognize my own voice. Silence. Not a forgiving silence. A waiting silence. A predator's silence. It knew I was here. It was waiting for me. To run, to scream, to break. The choice was simple. Cower here and wait for it to come out. Or go in and face it. The thought of waiting, of letting it have control, was somehow worse than the thought of what was inside that closet. My eyes scanned the room for a weapon. My gaze landed on the corner by the front door. My old baseball bat. A wooden Louisville slugger I hadn't touched since college. I moved slowly, deliberately. I told my legs to walk, one foot in front of the other. The floorboards didn't make a sound. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I reached the corner. My hand closed around the cool, smooth wood of the bat. The weight of it was a comfort. Solid. Real. I gripped it with both hands, knuckles white. I could feel my own heart pounding in my ears. I took a deep breath that did nothing to calm me. I turned toward the bedroom. One step. Then another. I moved down the short hallway, bat held high and ready. The bedroom doorway loomed. The darkness inside was absolute. I reached the threshold. I could see the closet now. The door was wide open, a black rectangle of shadow against the far wall. "I have a bat," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm calling the cops. Get the hell out of my house." It was a bluff. It knew I couldn't call anyone. But I had to say something. I had to make a sound. No response. Just that awful, potent silence. My body was screaming at me. "Don't go in. Just run. Get out now. Break the door down if you have to." But I couldn't. I couldn't run not knowing. I took the final step into the room, my back scraping against the doorframe. My eyes were locked on that black opening. I took another step, my sneakers silent on the carpet. I was in the middle of the room now. The air was cold. I raised the bat over my shoulder. With a raw yell that tore from my throat, I rushed the closet. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. I swung the bat into the darkness, a wild, wide arc, meant to break bones. Crack! The bat connected with the back wall of the closet, the impact shuddering up my arms. Hangers clattered. Clothes swayed. And that was it. Nothing came out. Nothing screamed. Nothing attacked me. I stood there, panting, wild-eyed. The bat still raised. I flicked the light switch on the wall beside me. The bare bulb flickered to life. The closet was empty, just my shirts and jackets hanging on the rail, a few boxes on the floor. Everything was exactly where it should be. There was no one there. My shoulders sagged. The bat felt impossibly heavy. I lowered it, the tip thudding softly onto the carpet. A wave of light-headedness washed over me. Had I imagined it? The creak? Was I losing my mind? The lack of sleep? The fear? I let out a shaky breath, a sound that was half sob, half laugh. I was an idiot. A terrified idiot with a baseball bat in an empty room. I turned to leave, to get away from the scene of my own meltdown, to go back to the locked front door and figure out how to smash it open. As I turned, something brushed against my ankle. I felt a tiny, soft snag on the rough canvas of my shoe. I glanced down. Lying across the top of my gray sneaker was a single strand of hair. It was long, jet black, shiny under the weak light of the bare bulb. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that hair. 2 years. It had been 2 years since I'd seen hair like that. Since Sarah had packed her bags and moved to Portland. She was the only person I'd ever known with hair that black, that straight, that long. She was 2,000 miles away. My mind reeled, trying to connect the impossible dots. The photo, the moved sofa, the locked door, the cleaned mug, and now this. A piece of her. A physical impossibility lying on my shoe in the middle of my locked-down, terror-filled apartment. The fear I felt before was nothing. That was fear of an intruder, a stalker, a ghost. This was different. This was a deeper, colder horror. It wasn't just my space that had been invaded. It was my life, my past. And whatever was in my apartment knew me. It knew everything. The hair. I couldn't look away from it. It lay on my sneaker like a dark crack in a white world. A single, impossible strand of Sarah's hair. My mind spun, a frantic engine trying to find traction on a patch of black ice. It couldn't be hers. Impossible. She was on the other side of the country. I hadn't seen her in 2 years. I hadn't spoken to her in 1. So this hair, this piece of evidence, was a lie. It had to be a lie. My mind was breaking. The photo, the mug, the sofa. I was snapping under the strain, hallucinating details from my past. That was it. That was the only answer that didn't shatter the laws of physics. I backed out of the bedroom, my eyes still locked on the closet. My breath came in shallow, useless little gasps. The Louisville Slugger felt heavy and stupid in my hand. I let it drop. It hit the hallway runner with a soft, defeated thud. Panic was a bad strategy. It had gotten me nowhere but a sore arm and a dent in my closet wall. I needed a new one. I needed to get out. That was the only goal. Get out of the apartment. Breathe air that wasn't thick with this wrongness. Go to work. Work was stupid. Work was data entry and spreadsheets that made my eyes bleed. Work was normal. God, I needed normal. I stumbled toward the bathroom, my hand bracing against the wall. The strand of hair was gone, left behind in the bedroom, but I could still feel it. A phantom touch on my shoe. My skin crawled. In the bathroom, I flicked on the light. The bright, sterile glow was a shock. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like hell. My eyes were wide, bloodshot, with dark, bruised-looking circles underneath. My face was pale, slick with a cold sweat. There was a twitch under my right eye. I didn't look like me. I looked like prey. Get it together, I whispered to the reflection. The man in the mirror didn't look convinced. His mouth was a thin, hard line. It's a prank. A very, very sick, elaborate prank. You're exhausted. You're seeing things. I had to believe it. I grabbed my can of shaving cream. The cold metal was a solid anchor in my trembling hand. I sprayed a plume of white foam into my palm. My hand shook so badly that some of it splattered onto the counter. I ignored it. I lathered the cream onto my face, the chemical smell of menthol, a sharp, clean scent that cut through the stale fear in the air, the routine. Stick to the routine. Wake up, shave, shower, go to work. Don't think about the photo, don't think about the mug, don't think about the hair. I picked up the razor, a cheap disposable one from a 5-pack. I held it up, my knuckles white. My own eyes stared back at me from the mirror, wide and frantic over the mask of white foam. Just shave. One simple act. As I brought the blade to my cheek, my gaze shifted in the reflection, past my own head, to the faucet of the sink. Drip. A single drop of water hung from the spout in the mirror. It swelled, glistening under the light. Drip. It fell, splashing silently into the drain of my reflection. Another one began to form immediately. My hand froze, the razor hovering inches from my skin. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had wrenched that faucet shut a few hours ago. I was obsessive about it. The sound of a dripping tap was one of the few things that could drive me crazy faster than my own thoughts. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered the razor. I turned my head away from the mirror and looked at the real faucet. It was perfectly still, bone dry, not a single drop of moisture on the chrome. The porcelain beneath it was clean, untouched. My heart began to beat a low, heavy drum against my ribs. A cold dread, deep and primal, started to seep into my bones. I turned back to the mirror. In the reflection, the faucet was still dripping. Drip, drip, drip. A steady, maddening rhythm that existed only in that silvered world behind the glass. I stared, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't a hallucination. This was different. This was a violation of reality itself. And then it got worse. The reflection of me, the pale, terrified man covered in shaving cream, moved. It moved on its own. While I stood frozen, a statue of horror, my reflection's lips peeled back from its teeth. They stretched wide. Too wide. An unnatural, predatory grin that reached from ear to ear. The eyes in the mirror were not my eyes. They were black, gleeful, and filled with a terrible, ancient knowledge. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I could only watch as the thing wearing my face in the mirror, the grinning, awful thing, slowly raised its reflected hand, not the hand holding the razor, the other one. It brought its index finger up to its smiling lips. And it shushed me. Shh! The spell broke. A strangled gasp tore from my lungs. I scrambled backwards, my feet tangling, my back slamming hard against the bathroom door. I fell through the doorway, landing in a heap on the hallway floor. The cool wood was a shock to my system. I crab-walked backward, away from that open door, away from that thing. Click! The sound was sharp, final. The sound of a bolt sliding home. I froze. My eyes shot to the bathroom door. The cheap brass knob was still. But I had heard it. I knew what I had heard. The lock. The push-button lock on the inside of the door. It had just been locked. From the inside. No, I whimpered. The word was a puff of air. No, no, no. I scrambled to my feet, my body acting on pure animal instinct. Who's in there? I screamed, my voice cracking. I lunged at the door, twisting the knob. It wouldn't turn. Locked, solid. I rattled it, a useless, frantic motion that only made the wood shudder in its frame. Open this door! Open it right now! I slammed my fist against the cheap hollow-core wood. The impact sent a painful jolt up my arm. I didn't care. What are you? Get out! Get out of my house! My only answer was a new sound from within the bathroom. Ksh! The sudden, violent rush of water. The shower. It had just been turned on. Full blast. The sound of it hitting the tiled floor echoed through the door. A deafening, hissing roar. I stopped pounding. I stood there, panting, my ear pressed against the wood. Through the sound of the water, I could hear something else. A low humming. It grew louder, forming words, a melody, a song. It was a lullaby, a stupid, simple lullaby about stars and sleepy sheep that my mother used to sing to me when I had a fever. A song I hadn't heard, or even thought of in 20 years. And the voice singing it. My blood turned to ice. My stomach dropped. I would know that voice anywhere. I heard it every time I spoke. It was my voice, coming from behind the locked door. Calm. Melodic. Singing a lullaby from my childhood while the shower roared. Stop it, I whispered, my forehead now pressed against the door. Please, just stop. The singing continued, cheerful and clear over the sound of the water. Each note was a separate violation, a razor blade slicing through my memories, taking something pure and twisting it into a weapon. This thing, this entity, it wasn't just in my home, it was in my head. It was rummaging through my life, through my childhood, and pulling out the things that were mine. I slid down the door, my legs giving out. I sat on the floor, my arms wrapped around my head, trying to block out the sound of my own voice murdering my past. My whole body was shaking, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. This was it. This was how I died. Not with a bang, but with a song. Locked out of my own bathroom, listening to a monster sing me to sleep. Then, as suddenly as it began, it all stopped. The water cut off. The singing ceased. The silence that followed was immense. Heavy. It pressed in on me from all sides, a physical weight. I held my breath. My heart hammered against my ribs, the only sound in the universe. I stared at the brass knob, waiting. Creak. Slowly. Agonizingly slowly. The door began to swing inward. It opened a crack, then an inch, then a foot, revealing a slice of the bathroom beyond. I pushed myself backward, scraping my hands on the floorboards, trying to put distance between me and that opening. I expected a shape to emerge from the darkness. A figure, the grinning thing from the mirror. Nothing came out. The door swung all the way open, bumping gently against the stopper. I could see the whole room now. It was empty. No one was there. The shower curtain was pulled back, the floor was wet, the air was thick with steam, but the room was deserted. I stayed on the floor, my mind a blank, white static. It was over. Whatever it was gone. The thought brought no relief, only a hollow, echoing exhaustion. After a minute that felt like an hour, I forced myself to my feet. My legs were unsteady, like a newborn foal's. I had to see. I had to be sure. I took a hesitant step toward the doorway, peering inside. The mirror over the sink was completely fogged over with steam, a gray, opaque canvas. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw it. There was something on the glass. Marks. Lines. Something had been written in the condensation, drawn with a fingertip. I took another step into the room. The cold, damp tile chilled my bare feet. My eyes focused on the writing. It wasn't random scribbles. It was a sentence, 4 words, written in big, blocky capital letters. My breath caught in my chest. Time stopped. The words seemed to burn into my brain, searing away every other thought, every other fear, replacing them with a new horror, blacker and deeper than anything I could have ever imagined. On the mirror, it said, "Remember your brother?" Brother. The word echoed in the empty space where my memories should have been. Remember your brother? I didn't have a brother. The thought was a flat, simple fact, a concrete block in a world that had turned to liquid. My father was an only child. My mother had a sister. I was the beginning and the end of my line. I had no brother. The damp air of the bathroom choked me. The steam, the words on the mirror, the ghost of my own voice singing a dead song. It was a cage. My legs found their purpose before my brain did. I didn't grab anything. I didn't think. I just ran. My bare feet slapped against the wooden floor of the hallway, a frantic, wet sound. I fumbled with the deadbolt on my front door, my fingers slick and useless. For one heart-stopping second, it wouldn't turn. A sob of pure terror caught in my throat. Then the mechanism gave way with a heavy clunk. I threw the door open and bolted into the blessedly neutral air of the 12th floor hallway. I didn't look back. I jammed my thumb against the elevator button. Once, twice, a dozen times, as if punishing it would make the car arrive faster. The little light glowed, indifferent. The wait was an eternity. Every shadow in the long, carpeted hall seemed to stretch and writhe. The door to my apartment, 1208, was still open. A dark, waiting mouth. Come on, come on, come on. Finally, a soft ding announced the elevator's arrival. The doors slid open. I lunged inside, jabbing the L button for the lobby with the same frantic energy. The doors began to close. Too slow. They were closing too slow. Through the shrinking gap, I could still see my open apartment door. I imagined a shape stepping out of the darkness and jamming its hand between the closing doors. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo. The doors sealed. The elevator began its smooth, silent descent. I was safe. For now. I leaned my head against the cool metal wall, panting. My reflection stared back from the polished surface. A wild-eyed, shirtless man, face still half smeared with drying shaving cream. I looked insane. Maybe I was. When the doors opened into the lobby, I stumbled out, my eyes scanning the wide, empty space. Polished marble floors, a few leather couches, the long, dark wood of the front desk. It was late. The night concierge, a college kid named Leo, was probably on his break. The lobby was empty. Good. I collapsed onto one of the couches, fumbling in the pocket of the sweatpants I'd slept in. My phone. Thank God. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it, my thumb hovering over my contacts list. Who do you call when your mind is breaking, when reality is tearing at the seams? There was only one person. Lynn. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was thick with sleep. Jake, what the hell? It's 3 a.m. Lynn. My voice was a raw whisper. Lynn, You have to help me." "Whoa, slow down. You sound awful. What's wrong?" The sleepiness in her voice was replaced by a sharp edge of concern. "There's someone in my apartment. Or something. I don't know." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to make the words make sense. It was in the mirror. It looked like me, but it wasn't. It locked me out of the bathroom. It was singing, Lynn. It was singing my mother's lullaby in my voice. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the rustle of sheets. She was sitting up. "Okay, Jake. Where are you right now?" "The lobby. I ran out. I left everything." "Okay, good. You're safe. Just stay there. Listen to me. Have you been sleeping? You've been under a lot of stress at work lately." Her voice was too calm. It was the voice you use on a spooked animal. Or a crazy person. "No, this isn't stress. This is real. It wrote something on the mirror, Lynn. It asked me about my brother." "Your brother? Jake, you don't have a brother." "I know!" I almost screamed the words, my voice cracking. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's playing with me. It knows things. The photo of Sarah, the—" "Jake, stop." Her voice was firm now. "Just breathe. I think maybe you should talk to someone, professionally. I can help you find a number in the morning. Maybe you just had a waking nightmare. A sleep paralysis thing." The words hit me like a splash of cold water. She didn't believe me. Of course she didn't. I sounded like a lunatic. Desperation clawed at my throat. "Lynn, please! You have to believe me!" Just then, my phone screen lit up. Another call was coming in. The name on the screen just said, "Unknown." My blood ran cold. "Lynn, hold on 1 second," I said, my voice dropping. "Jake, don't hang up." I switched the call. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Why would I answer this? It was instinct, a terrible, stupid instinct. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. Silence. Not the silence of a dead line. It was an open, breathing silence. I could hear the faint, ambient hum of an empty room. "Who is this?" I demanded, a little louder. And then I heard it, a sound that made the fine hairs on my arms stand straight up. It was an echo, faint, distorted, as if coming through another phone. I heard my own voice, tinny and distant. "1 second," my echoed voice said, followed by Lynn's frantic reply. "Jake, don't hang up." My mind buckled. It was a live feed of my conversation from 30 seconds ago. Whoever was on this line, they were close enough to have heard me talking. My eyes shot around the lobby, the leather couches, the potted plants, the dark reception desk. There was no one here. I slammed my thumb on the end call button, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I jumped to my feet, my heart pounding a hole in my chest. He was here. He was in the lobby with me. Or he was listening through something. The building's speakers? My own phone? My phone vibrated in my hand. A new text message. From the same unknown number. My thumb trembled as I opened it, just a few words. Back quote. "Your friend doesn't believe you. I do." Back quote. A wave of nausea washed over me. This thing wasn't just a monster. It was a strategist. It was isolating me. It heard Lynn's doubt, and it was using it, turning the knife. As I stared at the message, a sudden flicker of light caught my eye. I looked up. The large flat-screen TV mounted behind the reception desk, the one that usually looped a slideshow of idyllic pictures of the building, had just turned on. The screen wasn't showing a picture. It was a video feed. Black and white. Grainy. A familiar, long, carpeted hallway. It was the security camera from my floor. I froze, my feet rooted to the marble floor. The camera was pointed directly at the door of my apartment. Apartment 1208. The door I had left wide open, but the door wasn't open anymore. It was closed. As I watched, paralyzed, something impossible happened. Slowly, silently. The doorknob on my apartment door began to turn. All on its own. It turned a full 90 degrees with a smooth, deliberate motion. Then, with an agonizingly slow creak that I somehow felt more than heard, the door began to swing inward. It opened into the darkness of my apartment, a silent, beckoning invitation. No one was there, no hand on the knob, no shape in the doorway. It just opened. For me. "No," I whispered. I backed away from the desk, from the horrifying image on the screen. I needed to get out. Not just out of the apartment, but out of the building. The street. People. Lights. I turned and sprinted for the huge glass doors that led to the street. I threw my shoulder against the push bar. Nothing. It didn't budge. I pushed again, with all my weight. The door was solid, immovable. A small red light glowed on the electronic lock mechanism next to the frame. Locked. They were locked for the night. They weren't supposed to be locked until 4 a.m. Leo was supposed to be here to let residents in and out. "Leo!" I screamed, my voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. "Leo, open the door!" I hammered on the glass with my fist. My reflection hammered back at me, a desperate, half-naked madman. The street outside was quiet. A single car passed, its headlights sweeping across me before continuing on into the night. Click. The sound was sharp, electric. It came from the speakers in the ceiling. A voice followed. Not a human voice. A synthesized, robotic voice. The kind you hear on an automated train announcement. "Please return to your apartment, Mr. Evans." I froze, my fist still pressed against the cold glass. It knew my name. "Your guest is waiting." The words hung in the air, clinical and utterly monstrous. My guest. The thing from the mirror. The thing that sang my lullabies. The thing that opened my door. "No," I whimpered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." I backed away from the entrance, back toward the center of the lobby, my eyes darting into every dark corner. Then the lights began to flicker. One by one, the recessed lights in the ceiling blinked erratically. On, off, on, off. The lobby was plunged into a strobe effect, my shadow jerking around me like a broken puppet. The flickering grew faster, more violent. And then, with a final definitive thump, they all went out. Total darkness. The only light left was the cold, gray glow of the TV screen behind the reception desk, still showing the open, waiting door of my apartment. It was a beacon in the black, drawing my eyes, a promise of the horror that awaited me upstairs. I stood there, trembling in the dark, every nerve ending screaming. I was trapped. It had hurted me here, and now it had caged me. My phone, still clutched in my hand, vibrated again. A new notification lit up its screen, a harsh square of light in the overwhelming dark. Another message from the unknown number. It wasn't text this time. It was a video file. My breath hitched. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't look. But I couldn't stop myself. My thumb, moving with a will of its own, pressed play. The video was shaky, as if filmed by hand. The quality was poor, grainy, and steeped in darkness. It showed a man, shirtless, his face pale with terror, standing alone in the middle of a dark lobby. The only light came from a TV screen behind him, casting him in an eerie silhouette. He was holding a phone, its screen illuminating his face. He was looking down at it. He was watching a video. I was watching myself. Right now, my heart stopped. My lungs seized. The video feed was live, or near live. But the angle was all wrong. It wasn't from the security cameras. It wasn't from ground level. The camera was looking down, from high above, from somewhere in the vaulted ceiling of the lobby, from somewhere in the darkness, right above my head. My gaze shot upward, into the blackness of the vaulted ceiling. Nothing. Just shadows and the steel girders holding up the roof. But the video on my phone didn't lie. The angle was from up there, looking down, at me. A faint scraping sound drifted down from the darkness above. Metal on metal. That was it. I didn't scream. I didn't think. I ran. My bare feet slapped against the cold marble, a mad, wet rhythm of pure instinct, not for the locked main doors, not for the elevator, the metal box that was now just a pre-packaged coffin. I threw my entire body at the heavy steel door marked stairs. The metal bar groaned under my weight. It gave. I stumbled into the concrete echo chamber of the stairwell. The door slammed shut behind me with a boom that vibrated through the floor. The sound was horribly final. I was in a gray concrete tube, lit by single-caged bulbs at each landing. The smell of dust and cold cement filled my lungs. Up or down? The thing on the TV was upstairs. The hooded figure from the video was, or was going to be, upstairs. The thing that came through the mirror was upstairs. My apartment, my home, was a poisoned hive. Down. Down was the only way. My feet found a frantic pace on the steps, a clumsy, uncontrolled fall. I wasn't running, I was plummeting. The concrete scraped the soles of my feet. I didn't care. The stairwell was a spiral, a corkscrew into the gut of the building. Each landing I passed was a blur of painted numbers. 11, 10, 9. My lungs burned. My mind raced. Find someone. Anyone. A phone that works. A door that opens to the street. A security guard who isn't a ghost. At the 11th floor landing, I stopped. My chest heaved. Why here? No reason. It was just a number. It wasn't 12. I burst through the stairwell door into the hallway. It was identical to my own. Same beige carpet. Same generic landscape paintings on the wall. Same dim-timed lighting that made every shadow look like a waiting figure. It felt wrong. A carbon copy of a nightmare. I scanned the door numbers. 1112, 1110, 1108. My apartment was 1208. This was the one directly below me. I didn't hesitate. I hammered my fist on the door of 1108. I didn't knock. I pounded, the sound shockingly loud in the silence. Help! My voice was a shredded wreck. Please, somebody help me! Open the door! I waited. A second stretched into a year. Nothing. I was about to pound on the door again when I heard a series of metallic clicks. The deadbolt. The chain. The door opened a few inches, held by the brass security chain. A woman's face appeared in the gap. She was maybe in her 50s, her hair a mess of sleep-tousled gray, her face creased with annoyance. A floral nightgown. She squinted at me, shirtless and wild-eyed in the dim hall. "What in God's name is all this racket?" she demanded, her voice thick and gravelly. "Please," I gasped, leaning against the doorframe. My whole body trembled. "There's someone in my apartment. Right above you. In 1208. He's locked me out. He's controlling the building." The woman stared at me. Her expression didn't change. No alarm, no pity. Just a flat, tired assessment. She sighed, a long, weary sound that smelled of stale coffee. "A young man like you. It's almost 4 a.m. She shook her head slowly. "You're on something again, aren't you? The last time you boys had a party, the noise was unbearable. Management sent a warning." My blood ran cold. I stared at her. "What? What are you talking about? I've never had a party. I don't do drugs." She gave a small, humorless smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you don't. None of you ever do." "No, you don't understand," I insisted, my voice cracking with desperation. This wasn't happening. She wasn't listening. "This is real. He's in my apartment now. He's messing with the lights, the phones. You have to call the police for me. My phone, it's not working right." Her gaze drifted past my shoulder, down the long, empty hallway. For a moment I thought she saw something. But her eyes came back to me, and they were different. Colder. The tired annoyance was gone. In its place was something else. Something knowing. "You should go back upstairs," she said, her voice now a low, even monotone. It was completely different from the tired rasp she'd used before. "He's waiting for you." A knot of ice formed in my gut. "What did you say?" "Your friend," she continued, her lips pulling into that same strange, tight smile. "I heard him calling for you just a little while ago." "Jake. That's your name, isn't it?" I couldn't speak. I could only stare at her, my mind refusing to process the words. "He said he has a gift for you. He was very specific." She leaned closer to the crack in the door, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A gift. To help you remember." The word hit me like a physical blow. Remember your brother. The woman's smile widened. It was wrong. Her teeth were too white, too perfect, like a row of polished ceramic tiles. They didn't fit her face. My eyes, darting in panic, looked past her face, through the crack in the door, into her apartment. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I saw a cheap landscape print on the far wall, an ugly, generic picture of a forest, the same print that hung in my living room. I saw a dark scuff mark on the hardwood floor near the entryway, shaped like a question mark. This same mark I'd made last week trying to move my couch. I saw a blue armchair, its left arm slightly frayed. My armchair. In her apartment. It wasn't just similar. It was my apartment. An exact, perfect replica. I stumbled back from the door, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't real. None of this was real. D-I-Ng. The sound of the elevator arriving at the end of the hall cut through the air. My head snapped around. The metal doors slid open. A figure stepped out. Tall, dressed entirely in black. A black hoodie pulled low, shadowing the face completely. It was him, the man from the video feed I'd seen of myself. He didn't turn to look at me. He didn't acknowledge my existence. With a smooth, unhurried gait, the figure walked from the elevator and turned toward the stairwell, the door I had just come through. It was going up, to the 12th floor, to my apartment. I looked back at the woman. Her smile was gone. Her face was a blank mask. Slam! She threw the door shut. The deadbolt clicked. The chain rattled back into place. I was alone in the copied hallway. The only sound was the soft whoosh of the stairwell door closing as the hooded figure disappeared inside. Silence. I stood frozen, my heart a frantic hammer in the sudden quiet. I was trapped between a duplicate apartment with a monster's accomplice inside and a stairwell that now contained a physical threat heading for my home. What did I do? Where did I go? Knock! 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 The sound was so loud it made me jump out of my skin. It came from the door of 1108, the door the woman had just slammed in my face. 3 slow, heavy, deliberate knocks. Not a human knock. A sound with weight, with purpose. I stared at the wood, my body rigid. Then, a voice. It came from inside her apartment, muffled by the door, but I knew it instantly. It was the synthesized, glitchy voice of my own smart speaker, the one on my kitchen counter, 12 floors up. Thank you for your cooperation, the distorted voice buzzed through the door. Here is your reward. A scream erupted from inside the apartment. It wasn't long. It was a single, piercing shriek of utter terror, cut short as if a hand had been clamped over a mouth. And then, silence again. A silence that was heavier, fouler than before. A silence filled with the ghost of that scream. I stood there in the hallway, shaking. I was the bait. I had led it right to her door, and it had rewarded her. I looked from the silent, deadly door of 1108 to the stairwell where the hooded thing had gone. I was not trapped between two dangers. I was trapped in the middle of the hunt. And they were all around me. My legs moved before my brain did. A single primal command echoed in the meat of my bones. Run. Not up, not down, away. Away from the silence where the scream had been, away from door 1108. I didn't choose a direction, I just ran. My bare feet slapped on the polished floor tiles at the end of the hall, the sound wet and desperate. I picked a direction away from the stairwell, away from the elevator, deeper into the building's gut. The hallway stretched before me, a tunnel of beige carpet and bad art. Each door was a clone of the one before, a brass number bolted to a slab of wood, 1114, 1116, 1118. The timed lights flickered on ahead of me as I moved, a rolling wave of faint yellow illumination, as if the building itself was waking up to watch. My lungs were on fire. A stitch in my side felt like a knife twisting under my ribs. I kept going. The hallway was supposed to end. It was a U-shape. I knew the layout. It had to end. I should be seeing the far bank of elevators by now, but it just kept going. The sequence of doors continued, a monotonous, terrifying procession. 1120, 1122. The air grew colder. The The smell of dust and old wiring was thicker here. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The hallway behind me was a long, dark throat. The lights I had passed already timed out, plunging the path back into shadow. I was alone. Utterly alone. Then I saw it. Up ahead, a corner. I skidded to a stop, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. A corner? This hallway was straight. I had lived here for 2 years. There was no corner. It was impossible. My mind screamed that it was impossible, but my eyes saw it. A clean, 90-degree turn to the right. The beige carpet continued around it. Another identical landscape painting hung on the wall at the bend. This wasn't my building. Or it was, but it had been changed. Reshaped. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic, trapped bird. I was in a maze now. A maze that looked like home. Hesitantly, I took a step toward the corner. Then another. My bare feet made no sound on the thick carpet. I peered around the edge. More hallway. The same endless stretch of doors and dim lighting. But something was wrong. My eyes darted to the nearest door. The brass plate gleamed. 1301. My blood ran cold. 13. No, that couldn't be right. I stumbled back, my eyes scanning the doors I had just passed. I ran back a few paces, my chest tight with a new kind of fear. The door before the corner, 1122. The door around the corner, 1301. I didn't take any stairs. I didn't use the elevator. I had run in a straight line on a single floor, and I had gone up 2 levels. The logic of it was so broken, so fundamentally wrong, that my mind refused to process it for a second. I felt a wave of nausea. The walls seemed to pulse, to breathe in and out with the dim, timed lights. I was in a place that was pretending to be my home. A copy. A trap. And then the trap sprang. A shrill electronic screech pierced the air. It wasn't an alarm I recognized. It was a high, grating tone that vibrated in my teeth. I clamped my hands over my ears, my whole body flinching. Red lights flashed to life all along the ceiling, strobing in a sickening rhythm, plunging the hallway from dim yellow to blood red and back again. The world became a frantic stop-motion film of light and shadow. A voice, not human, crackled from hidden speakers in the ceiling. It was a cold, synthesized female voice, the kind you hear on a subway platform, unauthorized access detected in Sector C. The voice was calm, unflustered. It made the situation 1,000 times worse. Lockdown protocol initiated. All exits are now sealed. Whump, a sound like a guillotine dropping. I spun around. At the far end of the hallway, where I had come from, a massive slab of steel had slammed down from the ceiling, sealing the path. The edges sparked as it ground into the floor and walls. It was a fire door. A serious one. Thick, reinforced, and absolutely final. WHUMP. I looked the other way, down the impossible hall of the 13th floor. Another steel door crashed down, blocking the path ahead. I was sealed in. A rat in a metal box about 100 yards long. The strobing red lights painted the steel doors with a hellish glare. The alarms screeched on, a relentless assault on my senses. I stood in the middle of the hallway, bathed in red light, panting. My mind was a blank slate of pure terror. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Every door was locked. The exits were gone. The screeching alarm cut out. Silence. The sudden absence of sound was more terrifying than the noise itself. The red lights stopped strobing and settled into a deep, steady crimson glow. The hallway was now a silent, red-lit tomb. The only sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart and the harsh rasp of my breathing. That's when I saw him. He was just there, standing at the far end of the corridor, near the newly descended fire door. The hooded figure. The man from the video. The man from the elevator. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was just there now. He didn't move. He just stood in the red gloom, a column of blackness against the crimson steel. He was maybe 50 feet away. His head was down, the hood casting his face in total shadow. He wasn't running. He wasn't threatening. He was just watching me. I couldn't breathe. My feet were cemented to the floor. My entire survival instinct screamed at me to do something. Scream. run, attack. But I was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer wrongness of it all. He was the architect of this nightmare, the ghost in my machine. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his head. I still couldn't see a face, only a deeper patch of blackness under the hood. He tilted his head to one side, a curious, bird-like gesture. A predator observing its prey. It was the most inhuman movement I had ever seen. My body tensed. I was ready for him to charge. I was ready for the violence, for the end. But he didn't move toward me. He just stood there. And then, with an agonizing slowness, he raised his right arm. It was a smooth, silent motion. He wasn't pointing at me. He was pointing at something next to me. I followed the line of his outstretched finger, my eyes refusing to leave his form for more than a split second. My gaze landed on the door to my left. The brass plate gleamed in the red light. 1302. His finger remained extended. An order. A declaration. My eyes snapped back to the figure. He hadn't moved. He was a statue of judgment at the end of the hall. He wanted me to look at the door. He wanted me to understand. Click. The sound was small, but in the dead silence of the hall, it was as loud as a gunshot. It came from the door of 1302. My head whipped back toward it. The brass doorknob was turning. By itself. It turned slowly, with a series of soft, metallic clicks, as if an invisible hand were gripping it. It turned all the way, and then it stopped. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a soft whoosh of air, the door swung inward. It opened into a darkness that was absolute. It wasn't the darkness of an unlit room. It was a solid physical blackness, an abyss that seemed to suck the red light from the hallway into it. No furniture, no walls, no floor. Just a perfect, square void waiting for me. The figure down the hall lowered its arm. Its job was done. And then I heard the voice. It wasn't from the speakers in the ceiling. It wasn't from down the hall. It was right next to my ear. A whisper. A dry, glitchy, synthesized rustle of sound, like the smart speaker back in my apartment was whispering on my shoulder. "Come in, Jake." The voice knew my name. It was a distorted, broken sound, full of static and corrupted data, but the words were clear. It's time to face it. There were two choices: the monster down the hall, or the void in the wall. A known threat, or a black unknown. The red light of the hallway painted the steel door crimson, like the entrance to a furnace. The figure stood there, a patient, silent silhouette. It had brought me here. It wanted me to go through. That whisper, that corrupted data scrape of a voice, was still a stain on the air by my ear. "Come in, Jake." My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A drumbeat for the end of the world. I took one last look down the hall. The figure didn't move. It was a statue of judgment. Waiting. I chose the void. I didn't step. I fell into it. My bare foot left the carpet of the hallway and found nothing. For a split second, I was suspended between the world I knew and a place without purchase. Then the other foot followed, and I stumbled forward into absolute, total darkness. Slam. The door crashed shut behind me. The noise was a physical blow, a boom that vibrated through the floor and up my spine. The last slice of red light was gone. The silence that followed was heavier than the alarm had been. It was thick. It had weight. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. I was blind. My breathing was loud, ragged, a desperate sound in the suffocating quiet. Panic surged, hot and sharp. I was in a box, a dark box. I spun around, my hands flailing, and smacked my palms against a solid, cool surface. The door. I fumbled for a knob, a handle, anything. There was nothing. Just a flat, seamless expanse of wood. Sealed. I was sealed in. "Hello?" My voice was a weak tremor. It was swallowed by the dark. No echo, nothing. I had to move. Staying put was death. I kept one hand flat against the wall, a lifeline in the ink. I shuffled my feet, my toes brushing against what felt like a thin, worn carpet. One step, then another. The air was stale, smelling of dust and something else. Something familiar. Old paper and plastic. My questing fingers slid off the smooth plaster of the wall and hit a small plastic rectangle. A light switch. My heart leaped. I didn't hesitate. I flicked it down. Click. Light flooded the room. It was harsh yellow from a single fixture on the ceiling. I squeezed my eyes shut against the sudden glare, a grunt of pain escaping my lips. When I opened them again, the panic I'd felt in the dark was replaced by a new kind of terror. A chilling, deep-seated wrongness that made my blood run cold. This wasn't an apartment, it wasn't a storage room, it was my childhood bedroom. Not a room that looked like it, it was it. The pine bunk bed stood against the far wall, the wood covered in a web of scratches and faded stickers. My name, Jake, was carved into the post of the top bunk with a pocket knife. I saw the cheap blue comforter on the bottom bunk, the one with the cigarette burn near the corner from a mistake I'd made when I was 16. My eyes darted around the room, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. The desk in the corner. A clunky, beige testament to the late 90s. On it, my old model kits. An X-Wing, its S-foils locked in attack position. A TIE fighter, one of its wings slightly crooked from the time I dropped it. The Millennium Falcon, half-painted, the tiny brush still resting in a dried-up pot of silver paint. On the wall above the desk, a poster of Superman. The corner was peeling, held up by a yellowing piece of Scotch tape. I remembered putting that tape there myself. I remembered the exact moment. Summer. I was 12. I took a shaky step forward, then another. My bare feet sank into the scruffy gray carpet. I could feel the thinness of it, the hardness of the floorboards underneath. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the desk. It was real. The cool, smooth laminate surface was real. I ran a finger over the TIE fighter. The dust that came away on my fingertip felt real. How? How was this possible? This room, this furniture, it was all 3 states away, in a house my parents had sold a decade ago. It was gone. It didn't exist anymore. This place was a weapon, a psychological torture chamber built just for me. The reality-bending hallway was one thing. This was another. This was personal. This was predatory. My gaze settled back on the desk, on the computer. It was a beast. An ancient Packard Bell with a monitor the size of a small microwave. It shouldn't work. It couldn't work. BZZT-HM. As if on cue, the monitor flickered to life. A low, electronic hum filled the room. The screen glowed, a pale, cancerous blue, before an image resolved itself from the static. It was a video. A home video. Grainy, washed out, with a timestamp in the bottom corner that read August 14th, 1999. I saw a party. Balloons. A cake with 9 candles on it. I saw a younger version of myself, a skinny kid with a goofy haircut and a missing front tooth, grinning at the camera. And then the camera panned, and I saw him. Daniel. My stomach twisted into a knot. It was him, my little brother. He was 7, all big ears and a smile that was an exact copy of mine. He was chasing a balloon, his laughter, a tinny, cheerful sound coming from the PC's cheap speakers. I couldn't breathe. I was watching a ghost. The scene in the video cut. Now we were in this room. The camera, held by my mom, was wobbly. I was on the top bunk. Daniel was on the bottom, reading a comic book. I remembered this day. I remembered it with a clarity that was a punch to the gut. On the screen, my younger self grinned a wicked, childish grin. "Earthquake!" he yelled, and I started to shake the bed. The heavy wooden frame began to rock back and forth. On screen, Daniel laughed at first. "Stop it, Jake!" he squealed, his voice full of glee. I didn't stop. I shook it harder. The whole frame groaned in protest. The camera zoomed in on Daniel's face. His laughter was gone now. His eyes were wide. "Jake, stop! For real, stop!" My younger self was relentless. He was a little god on his mountaintop, drunk on the tiny, stupid power he had over his brother. I watched, horrified, as my own memory played out like a horror film. I remembered the feeling, the thrill of being the older, stronger one. Daniel tried to get out. He scrambled toward the edge of the mattress, his small hands grabbing for the wooden frame to steady himself. The bed lurched violently one more time. His hands slipped. I watched him fall in jerky, low-resolution, slow motion. His body twisted in the air. Time in the real world seemed to slow down with the video. I could feel the floor vibrate with the memory of the impact. His head hit the corner of the desk, the very desk that stood in front of me. The impact was a dull, wet thwack on the video's audio track. A sound I had never, ever been able to get out of my head. Daniel lay on the floor, unnaturally still. The camera dropped, and my mom's scream filled the speakers. The video froze. Not on Daniel. It froze on my face, my 9-year-old face peering down from the top bunk. The grin was gone. In its place was a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. The face of a boy who had just broken his favorite toy and knew, instantly, that he could never fix it. Click. The screen went black. The humming stopped. The silence rushed back in, 10 times heavier than before. I stood there, staring at my own faint reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. My chest was tight. My throat was closed. That single image, my face, was burned onto my retinas. That's when I felt it. A shift in the air behind me. A sudden drop in temperature. The feeling of being watched, not by a camera, but by eyes. I wasn't alone in the room. The hooded figure had been here the whole time. Slowly, as if in a nightmare, I started to turn. My body was stiff, my joints like rusted hinges. I already knew what I would see, but knowing didn't help. The terror was still absolute. It was standing right behind my chair. A pillar of black cloth in the yellow light. It was so close I could have reached out and touched it. Its head was bowed, the face lost in the artificial shadow of the hood. A hand, gloved in black leather, rose slowly. It reached out. I was paralyzed. My feet were nailed to the floor. I couldn't scream. I could only watch as the hand came closer, closer, and then rested on my shoulder. The cold seeped through my shirt instantly. It wasn't the cold of leather. It was a deep, draining cold, like a block of dry ice. It leached the warmth from my body, a cold that felt like it was sinking right into my bones. My entire body tensed for the attack, for the knife, for the end. But nothing happened. The hand just rested there, a gesture of calm, terrifying ownership. And then the whisper came again, not in my ear, but next to it. It wasn't the glitchy, synthesized voice from the hallway. This voice was clear, clean, and terrifyingly human. It was a woman's voice. "You never visited him in the hospital," it said, the words soft, precise, each one a perfectly sharpened icicle sliding into my ear. Not once. The accusation hit me harder than any physical blow could have. It was true. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I was too scared, too ashamed. I never went. How could she know that? My parents never told anyone. My mind shattered. Who was this? What was this? Hema. As if hearing my thoughts, the figure moved. The hand on my shoulder squeezed once, a gesture of finality. And then, with an almost casual slowness, the hood fell back. It didn't drop because of a sudden movement. It just slid off, pooling around the collar of the black sweatshirt. Long, dark hair cascaded down, and a face was revealed in the pale light of the room. My heart stopped. My blood turned to ice. My entire world tilted on its axis and broke apart. It was Lynn, my best friend. The person I texted every single day, the person who had a key to my apartment. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. There was no anger in her eyes, no madness, just a calm, hollow emptiness that was more frightening than any rage. It was Lynn. It had always been Lynn. The hacking, the smart speaker, the sheer, impossible logistics of it all. She worked in cybersecurity. She could have done it. The thought was a bolt of lightning that fried every circuit in my brain. She looked at me, her head tilted slightly, the same curious bird-like gesture the figure had made in the hallway. "Hey, Jake," she said, her voice now the normal, familiar voice I'd heard 1,000 times on the phone. "Surprise! Lynn?" The name was a crack in the ice of my reality. My lips formed the word, but no sound came out. It couldn't be. Not her. My brain refused it, tried to spit the image out like a bad piece of food, but my eyes wouldn't lie. It was her face. The same freckles scattered across her nose. The same dark, analytical eyes. Eyes that had looked at me with warmth and laughter just yesterday over a coffee. Now they were pits of cold glass. "Lynn?" My voice finally worked. A dry, scraping sound. "What? Why?" She looked at me, her head still tilted in that curious way. The gesture wasn't a question anymore. It was an evaluation. She was studying a specimen. "You've been drowning in it, Jake, for years." Her voice was calm. So terribly, horribly calm. "You lock yourself in your apartment. You orbit your own guilt like a dead moon. We were just helping you get out." The word hit me like a physical blow. We. My gaze snapped away from her. The word echoed in the fake bedroom, a promise of more horrors to come. We. It wasn't just her. As if on cue, a soft click came from the door to the room. The door I had stumbled through from the hallway. It swung inward, slowly, silently. A woman stood in the doorway. My blood went cold. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a hooded figure. It was a face I hadn't seen in person in 5 years, but knew as well as my own. Older, lines of stress around her eyes I didn't recognize, but it was her. My sister. Sarah. She stepped into the room. She didn't look at the bed, or the desk, or the posters. She looked only at me. Her expression wasn't angry or sad. It was determined, resolute, the look of a surgeon before a long, difficult operation. Behind her, 2 more figures filed in. They weren't ghosts or demons. They were men in dark blue polo shirts and khaki pants. Technicians. One of them held a ruggedized laptop, the screen glowing with complex lines of code and diagrams. I caught a glimpse of it. A floor plan of my apartment building. A wireframe model of my living room. A series of sliders and toggles labeled *speaker _LR door _lock _main TV feed override My entire life for the past 48 hours condensed into a user interface. "We?" I repeated, my voice shaking with a rage that was starting to burn through the shock. My eyes shot from Sarah to Lynn. "What the hell is we?" Sarah took another step forward. The technicians remained by the door, impassive, like store mannequins. "It's called reactive immersion therapy, Jake," she said. Her voice was flat, clinical, as if she were reading from a textbook. "A controlled psychological stress event, designed to break a cycle of trauma-induced isolation." My mind reeled. The pieces didn't just fall into place, they slammed together with the force of a car crash. The emails, the hacked smart speaker, the TV, the fake neighbors banging on the walls, the lockdown of the entire building. It wasn't one stalker. It wasn't a ghost. It was a production. A full-scale psychological operation. "You're insane," I whispered. The words felt small and useless in the face of this. "You are all completely insane." "Are we?" Sarah countered, her voice hardening. "I called you 37 times in the last year, Jake. You answered twice. I flew to the city 6 months ago. You said you were busy. You've built a prison for yourself, and you were rotting in it. You needed a shock to the system. Something profound enough to force you to confront the thing you've been running from your whole life." She pointed a rigid finger at the desk. At the corner of the desk. The corner my brother's head had hit. "You needed to be back here. You needed to feel it again. My gaze shifted to Lynn. The ultimate betrayal. The node in the network I never could have predicted. She had a key. She knew my schedule. She knew my passwords. She worked in cybersecurity. It was all so simple, so clean, so monstrously logical. And you? I spat the word at her. You helped them? You did this to me? Lynn's blank expression finally broke. A flicker of something, pity maybe, crossed her face. He wouldn't listen to anyone else, Jake. Sarah came to me. She was desperate. I knew this was the only way to get through to you. You trusted me. I used that. Yes. The admission was so blunt, so direct, it stole the air from my lungs. She wasn't sorry, she was justified. In their minds, this was medicine. This torture was a cure. Therapy? I screamed, the sound ripping from my throat. It was a raw, animal sound of pure fury. You call this therapy? You locked me in my apartment. You made me think I was going to be murdered. It worked, Sarah said, her voice cutting through my rage. You're here. You're out of your box. You're feeling something other than that dull, gray nothing you wrapped yourself in for a decade. That was it. The final switch flipped in my head. The part that processed reason or fear or shock just shut down. All that was left was a white-hot core of instinct. Get out. I moved. It wasn't a decision. It was a biological imperative. I lunged forward, not at Sarah, but at Lynn. I slammed my hands into her shoulders, shoving her backward with all the force I could muster. She stumbled, her eyes widening in genuine surprise for the first time. She hit the desk. The half-painted Millennium Falcon model clattered to the floor, breaking apart. I didn't wait to see more. I spun and bolted out of the room, past the stunned technicians, past my sister's cry of my name. Jake! I was back in the hallway. It was different now. The emergency lights were off. The normal soft white overhead lights were on, revealing a generic beige-carpeted corridor. The heavy steel doors that had sealed the hall were gone, retracted back into the ceiling. It was just a normal apartment hallway again. The illusion was over. I saw the elevator at the far end. The doors were sliding shut. Through the narrowing gap, I saw them. Sarah. The two technicians. They weren't trying to follow me. They were leaving. Sarah's face was a pale mask, her eyes locked on mine. She wasn't scared, she wasn't angry, she just watched me. The technician with the laptop gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The doors slid shut with a soft, final thump. The light above it dinged. They were going down. I stood there, panting, my heart hammering against my ribs. My whole body trembled with adrenaline and rage. I was free. The trap had opened. But I didn't feel free. I felt flayed open, every nerve exposed to the air. Jake, wait! Lynn's voice. I turned to see her, hurrying down the hallway toward me. Her face was flushed, her hair a mess. She looked like the friend I knew again, and the sight was somehow more repulsive than her blank stare had been. Get away from me, I snarled, backing away down the hall. Don't you touch me. Please, just listen, she said, her hands held up in a placating gesture. She stopped a few feet away, her breathing ragged. It's too much. I told her it was too much. But she wouldn't listen. Get away. Each word was a chunk of ice. It's Daniel, she said, her voice dropping, cracking with an emotion I couldn't place. The name stopped me cold. It was the key, the source code of all this madness. She saw me hesitate. She took a careful step closer. Your brother, she started, her voice barely a whisper. The sound was swallowed by the hum of the building's ventilation. He's in the hospital, Jake, the hospice ward. He's dying. The word hung in the air between us. Dying. It didn't make sense. Daniel was alive. He was disabled, yes. He lived in an assisted care facility near our parents' new place. I sent money. I got short, polite updates from Sarah now and then. He was stable. The accident, the damage was worse than they knew. Lynn continued, her eyes welling up. A slow decline, for years. but it got fast. The last few weeks, it's gotten really fast. He's not really there anymore. My legs felt weak. The concrete floor seemed to soften beneath my feet. The strength, the rage, the fire that had propelled me out of that room, it all just vanished. It flowed out of me, leaving a hollow, aching void. Lynn took another step. Her voice was thick with tears now. He's gonna die, Jake. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. Sarah tried to tell you, but you wouldn't pick up the phone. She just wanted you to see him. One last time. The hallway floor was cold against my spine. My legs had given out. Just gone. One moment I was standing, a pillar of fire and rage. The next, I was a pile of rags on the beige carpet. The words echoed in the space where my thoughts should have been. He's dying. One last time. The rage was gone. The fear was gone. The 48 hours of terror, the psychological siege, the monstrous betrayal by my own sister, my own friend, all of it had been sucked out of me. A vacuum remained. An aching, silent nothing. The clinical white lights of the hallway hummed above. The metal doors were gone. The illusion was broken. This wasn't a high-tech prison. It was just a hallway in an apartment building. The truth was supposed to set you free. It didn't. The truth was a cage made of bone and regret, one I had been living in all along. They just gave it a new name. Reactive immersion therapy. God. Lynn was still standing there, a silhouette against the light at the end of the hall. I heard her take a shaky breath. I heard her soft-soled shoes approaching on the carpet. She knelt down beside me. Her movements were careful, hesitant, as if I were a wounded animal that might still bite. She didn't say anything. A plastic bottle of water entered my field of vision. I stared at it. A simple object. Water. My throat felt like sandpaper. I didn't move. Jake, she finally whispered. The name was a pebble, dropped into a deep well. I'm sorry. I swear to you, we tried everything else. She tried everything else. I didn't look at her. I looked at the repeating floral pattern on the carpet. How? My voice was a croak, a dead leaf skittering across pavement. The tech. I get that. You work in cybersecurity. You and your team could lock down the systems, but the rest of it. I pushed myself up, my back hitting the wall. The coolness of it seeped through my shirt. I finally turned my head and looked at her. Her face was puffy, streaked with tears. It meant nothing to me. The face, I said, the words coming out flat. In my bathroom mirror, the voice that whispered my name, the song, the lullaby. How did you project a face onto my mirror? How did you make the singing sound like it was right behind me? Lynn frowned. A deep, genuine line of confusion creased her brow. It was the first honest expression I'd seen on her face in days, and it terrified me more than the blank stare she wore in the fake bedroom. What? She asked, her voice small. What face? Jake, there was nothing in the plan about a face in a mirror. A cold prickle started at the base of my neck. Don't lie to me, Lynn, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I'm not, she insisted, her eyes wide. She shook her head, a frantic, jerky motion. I'm not. I saw the whole script. Sarah's plan, the psychological triggers. It was all about isolation and sounds. Banging on the walls, the TV override, the lockdown, the messages. There was no singing. There was no face. We didn't do that. The cold prickle became an icy dread, spreading down my arms, into my chest. My heart, which had been beating with a dull, exhausted rhythm, gave a hard, painful jolt. Wait. No! My mind flashed back. The hacked smart speaker, the distorted text-to-speech voice. That was them. The TV screen flickering with the image of my own front door. That was them. The doors slamming shut. Them. But the other things. The subtle things. The figure I thought I saw for just a second reflected in the dark screen of my phone. The soft, humming melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The chilling whisper of my name that wasn't from a speaker but felt like it was breathed directly into my ear. Those weren't on the script. Lynn didn't know about them, which meant they weren't part of the show. The message I said, my mouth suddenly dry again. I grabbed the water bottle from her hand and twisted the cap, my fingers fumbling. The one typed on my laptop, the one that was there when I woke up. "We see you?" she asked. "Yeah, that was part of the initial phase, to trigger the paranoia." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Not that one. The other one. The one that came later. On the notepad file." I looked straight into her eyes. It said, "Remember your brother?" Lynn's face went pale. All the color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin looking like wax. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She just stared at me, her own fear now mirroring mine. "Lynn," I pressed. "That was you, right? Sarah told you to write that?" She shook her head slowly. "No. Oh, God, Jake, no. Sarah's plan was clinical. It was cruel, but it was detached. She wouldn't use Daniel like that. Not as a direct taunt." My blood ran cold. Then it wasn't a taunt. It wasn't a threat from a team of sick therapists. My brain couldn't process it. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. The whole elaborate production, the technicians, my sister's cold determination, that was reality A. It was solid, twisted, but solid. But there was another reality, reality B, running on a parallel track the whole time. A ghost in the machine they built, an unseen actor on their stage. And it wasn't trying to scare me. "Remember your brother, Afray?" It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a weapon. It was a question, a plea. A desperate cry for help from a place I couldn't understand, piggybacking on the electronic horrors my sister had unleashed. A new kind of terror, cleaner and sharper than anything I had felt before, sliced through the fog in my head. We weren't alone in this hallway. We had never been alone. The game I thought was over had never even been the real game at all. As if the thought itself was a trigger, the lights in the hallway flickered. Once. Twice. Lynn gasped, scrambling backward on her hands and knees. "What's happening?" Then, with a soft pop and a final electrical hum, the lights went out, plunging us into absolute darkness. "No," Lynn breathed, her voice trembling beside me in the black. No, the program is over. The technicians are gone. They shut it all down." Her panic was the switch. My own fear ignited into a wildfire. She was right, the puppet masters had left the theater. But something was still on the stage. A familiar, crackling static filled the air. It wasn't coming from one place. It was coming from the emergency speakers embedded in the ceiling all along the hall. The sound my sister had used to torture me. But the voice that spoke was not the synthesized, robotic monotone from before. This was different. It was a whisper, a ragged, wet sound, stretched and distorted by the cheap speakers, but underneath the static, it was organic. It was the sound of someone trying to speak with lungs full of water. The sound of a last, dying breath. "Jacques!" Lynn screamed. A raw, piercing sound that was cut short. The voice from the speakers changed. It was no longer a name. It was a command, a single, desperate, repeated word. "Go!" The static crackled. "Go! Go!" "The stairs!" I yelled, grabbing for Lynn's arm in the dark. My hand found her sleeve. I pulled. "Now!" My phone. I needed my phone. Where the hell was my phone? Lynn was already fumbling with her own. Its screen flared to life, a small, brilliant rectangle of light cutting through the oppressive black. It cast our shadows long and dancing against the walls. For half a second we were frozen in its beam, two panicked figures in a concrete tomb. "The elevator is dead," she stammered, aiming the light down the hall. "The stairwell is the other way." She got to her feet, pulling me with her. My legs still felt like rubber, but the adrenaline was a brutal master. Run. The command echoed in my skull, a primal instinct. But as the beam of her phone's light swung past my apartment, we both saw it, and we both stopped dead. My door. Apartment 1208. The door I had slammed shut, The door, I was sure, was locked. It was open. Just a crack. A dark, vertical slit in the wall. And as we watched, paralyzed, the phone light trembling in Lynn's hand, the door swung inward. Slowly. Silently. It opened into the blackness of my apartment. A figure was standing there. In the doorway. The light caught it. It wasn't one of the technicians. It wasn't my sister. It was small. So small. A thin, frail shadow, its shape distorted by the angle of the light. It took a step out into the hallway. A slow, shuffling, dragging step. Then another. It wasn't an actor. It wasn't a projection. It was real. And it had the shape of a child. The phone light trembled, a frantic, tiny spotlight in an ocean of black. It danced over the figure, catching the frayed edge of a t-shirt, the pale curve of a small knee, the bare feet standing on the cold hallway floor. Lynn made a sound beside me, a choked, wet gasp. Who is that? Her voice was a thin wire stretched to its breaking point. Jake, is that one of them? Another actor? But I knew. The frantic terror that had just seized me moments before was gone, replaced by something else. A cold, heavy certainty that settled in my gut like a block of ice. The frantic, hammering beat in my chest, slowed to a deep, painful thud. One beat. Pause. Another beat. Each one an eternity. This wasn't an actor. This wasn't part of the show. My mind replayed the last 48 hours, not as a victim's memory, but as a series of clues. The face in the mirror, so fleeting I thought I'd imagined it. The lullaby, the one my mother used to sing to him. The message on the laptop. Remember your brother? It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a taunt. It was a key. Daniel, I breathed. The name was barely a whisper, but in the dead air of the hallway, it felt like a shout. The small figure didn't respond. It didn't look at me. It just stood there, a fragile silhouette against the deeper darkness of my apartment. Lynn's shaky light couldn't seem to decide what to focus on, her fear making the beam jump and skitter across the walls and floor. She was hyperventilating, her breaths coming in short, sharp bursts. Jake, what are you talking about? She hissed, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into my bicep. That's not funny. Who the hell is that? It's him, I said, my voice flat. I couldn't feel her nails. I couldn't feel anything. I pulled my arm from her grasp and took a step forward. The figure remained motionless. Then it moved. It wasn't a sudden action. It was slow, deliberate. A small, pale arm lifted, bone white in the phone's glare. The hand was thin, the fingers long. It didn't reach for us. It didn't make a threatening gesture. It pointed. Past us. Down the long, dark corridor. Right at the closed, metal doors of the elevator bank. I stopped. My brain struggled to process the image. The ghost of my dead brother was standing in the hallway, pointing at our only other way out. It's not trying to hurt us, I heard myself say. My own voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. Lynn, look, he's warning us. Warning us about what? She cried, her voice cracking. The program is over! The technicians are gone. There's nothing else. Ding. The sound was clean, sharp, impossible. It cut through Lynn's panic and my own cold dread. It was the sound of the elevator arriving. A narrow strip of light appeared as the doors slid open at the far end of the hall. The light spilled out, illuminating the ugly carpet, painting a long, rectangular path towards us. In the lighted frame of the open elevator stood two people. My sister, Sarah, and one of the technicians, a skinny kid with glasses I'd seen on the monitors. They were staring down the hall at us, their faces masks of pure, unfiltered shock. Sarah's cold, clinical composure was gone. Her mouth was half open, her eyes wide with a confusion that was rapidly turning to fear. The technician stood beside her, clutching a tablet to his chest like a shield. What's going on? Sarah called out, her voice echoing in the hall. The power's out on the whole floor. We've been trying to get the elevator to go down for 5 minutes. The technician took a step forward, his face slick with sweat. It won't, he stammered, his eyes darting from us to the small figure and back again. The controls are dead. It just keeps coming back up here, to this floor. The circle of the cage hadn't been broken. It had just gotten wider, pulling my sister inside with us. I looked back at the small figure, at Daniel. He hadn't moved. His arm was still outstretched, his finger still pointing. He wasn't pointing at the elevator anymore. He was pointing at the people in it. Or, not at them. At something we couldn't see. Lynn's light wavered, casting our shadows long and monstrous against the walls. The static from the emergency speakers had stopped. The silence that fell was worse. It was heavy. Listening. "This is impossible," the technician whispered, his voice trembling. "The core system is offline. The building grid is on a separate circuit. Nothing should—" Bang! The sound was not a gunshot. It was wood and metal screaming. It came from our left. My head whipped around. Lynn yelped and dropped her phone. It clattered to the carpet, the light now pointing uselessly at the ceiling, plunging us back into a world of shadow and silhouette. The door to apartment 1108 flew open. The apartment of the fake, friendly old lady actor. It didn't swing. It burst from its frame, splintered wood exploding into the hallway. A shape emerged from the darkness within. It wasn't the old woman. It wasn't human. It moved with a speed that my eyes couldn't properly track. It was a low, dark blur of limbs, scuttling, not running, across the carpet. A spider made of shadows and wrong angles. It ignored Lynn and me completely. It ignored the ghostly figure of my brother. It shot across the hall, a missile of twitching limbs and silent velocity, aimed directly at the light of the open elevator. Aimed directly at my sister. Sarah screamed. A real scream this time, not a manufactured sound effect. It was raw and sharp with mortal terror. The technician threw his tablet and tried to scramble back, but there was nowhere to go. The thing was on them in a heartbeat. It leaped, a black mass against the elevator light. My body was frozen. My mind was a blank slate of white noise. I saw it happen as if I were watching it on a screen. Time stretched, slowing to a crawl. The dark shape, its limbs unfolding. My sister's face a perfect picture of horror. Then, something else moved. The small figure. Daniel. He didn't run. He just appeared. One moment, he was by my doorway. The next, he was in the center of the hall, directly between the leaping nightmare and our sister. He didn't raise his hands to fight. He didn't make a sound. He just stood there, a tiny defiant shield of light and memory. The scuttling thing didn't stop. It couldn't. It collided with him. There was no impact, no sound of a blow landing. For a single, silent moment, the dark, twitching shape of the creature seemed to envelop the small, faint outline of my brother. Light and shadow merged, and then the light was gone. Daniel vanished, like smoke in the wind, like a final exhaled breath. He was just gone. The thing landed with a soft thud on the carpet just inside the elevator. It stumbled, its momentum broken. It stood up, not like a person, but like a marionette whose strings had been cut and then violently pulled taut. It slowly straightened its long, spindly limbs. Sarah was huddled in the corner of the elevator, sobbing. The technician had curled into a ball beside her, whimpering. The creature paid them no mind. Its purpose, its target, was gone. Slowly, deliberately, it turned. It turned to face the three of us left in the hall. Lynn, still on the floor. Me, standing, frozen. My sister, cowering in the only light left in the world. My eyes adjusted just enough to see it. It was tall and painfully thin. Its limbs were too long for its body. But that wasn't the worst part. It had no features. Its head was a smooth, pale oval, like an egg. No eyes, no nose, no ears. Just a mouth. It wasn't a real mouth. It was a carved line. A deep, black crescent that stretched too far on both sides, pulled up into a fixed, silent, exultant grin. And it was looking right at us. The silence in the hallway was a physical thing. It pressed in on us, a weight in the air where screams should have been. My own breath was trapped in my chest, a stone blocking my throat. Lynn was a heap on the floor, a statue of terror. In the stark elevator light, Sarah was pressed into the far corner, her face a white mask of disbelief. And the thing in the center of the hall, the thing with the featureless face and the long, wrong limbs, just stood there, Its head was a smooth, pale oval, blank, empty, except for the mouth, that black carved crescent, a smile of pure, unending joy. It wasn't looking at me. It wasn't looking at Lynn. The silence broke. "What do you want?" Sarah's voice was thin and sharp, slicing through the stillness. It trembled, but it was edged with the same cold authority she'd used on me for 2 days. She was trying to take control, trying to make sense of the impossible. "Is it money? We have money. You can have whatever you want." The creature did not respond. Not with words. It simply tilted its head. A slow, curious motion, like a bird examining a strange new bug. A sound came from that carved mouth. Not a word. Not a laugh. It was a dry, scraping chuckle. The sound of dead leaves skittering across pavement. A sound that scraped the inside of my skull. It was a sound of amusement. A sound that said her words, her logic, her money, were a joke. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't an attack. This was something else. The thing's head straightened. The empty smile seemed to widen, though it hadn't moved at all. Then, slowly, it turned its blank face away from Sarah, cowering in the elevator. It ignored Lynn on the floor. Its focus, its entire horrifying presence, settled on the technician. The kid was still trying to make himself small behind my sister, his body coiled into a ball of pure terror. His breath came in wet, hitching sobs. He saw the shift. He felt that faceless gaze lock onto him. "No," he whispered. The word was a puff of air. "No, not me. It wasn't me." My mind seized on his words. Not me. What did he mean, not me? The creature took a step. It didn't walk. It glided, a silent, fluid movement that was more horrifying than a heavy footstep. Another step. It was closing the distance to the elevator, to him. "Please," the technician begged, scrambling backward, his hands held up as if to ward off a physical blow. "I didn't do anything. I swear, I was just working." The creature stopped. It was only a few feet from the elevator doors now, a tall, spindly silhouette against the light. It raised one of its impossibly long arms. The arm was thin as a branch, ending in fingers that were too long, too sharp. It didn't reach for him. It pointed. A single, skeletal finger aimed directly at the technician's chest. Then it spoke. The voice that came from that carved grin was not its own. It was a gargle, a wet, choked sound, distorted and broken. But I recognized it. We all recognized it. It was the voice of the actress. The kind, friendly old woman from apartment 1108, from the moment she was killed on screen. A recording of a death rattle. "You took," the voice rasped, a horrific parody of the woman's last breath, "something that doesn't belong to you." The technician let out a choked cry. "No, I didn't." Psst. A jolt of static erupted from the small wall-mounted TV in the elevator lobby, the one that had been showing a looped, silent feed of our very own hallway. The screen flashed, went black, then flickered to life with a new image. It wasn't a live feed. It was a recording. The quality was grainy, stamped with a time code from earlier that evening. The camera angle was from inside apartment 1108. It showed the technician. He was alone, setting up the scene for the show. He placed the fake blood packet on the old woman actor's chest. He checked the hidden cameras. He moved with a bored, practiced efficiency. Then he paused. His eyes darted toward the door, making sure he was alone. On the screen, he walked over to an old wooden mantelpiece. He picked something up. It was small, dark wood, intricately carved. A music box. He examined it for a moment, his face a mask of casual greed. He turned it over in his hands. Then, with another quick glance at the door, he stuffed it into the large side pocket of his work vest. He patted the pocket, smoothed his vest down, and went back to his work as if nothing had happened. The screen went black. The hallway was dead silent once more. No one breathed. The air was thick with the horrible, sudden truth. This whole thing, the system failures, the ghost of my brother, the terror, it was never about the show. It was never about me. It was never even about Sarah and her sick experiment. It was about a cheap, stolen trinket. All this horror, For a fucking music box. The technician was shaking violently now, his face slick with sweat and tears. His eyes were wide with a terror that went beyond the fear of death. It was the terror of being caught, of being judged by something that could not be reasoned with. His hands flew to the pocket of his vest. He fumbled inside, his fingers clumsy and slick. He pulled it out. The music box. It looked old, ancient. The wood was dark, almost black in the dim light. "Here!" he screamed, his voice cracking into a child's shriek. "Take it! Take it back!" He didn't wait. He didn't think. He just acted. He threw the box. It flew through the air in a clumsy arc, tumbling end over end, aimed directly at the creature's chest. The creature didn't move to catch it. It didn't flinch. It didn't even seem to notice. The music box hit its thin torso with a dull thud and clattered to the carpeted floor between them. It lay there, inert, unimportant. The offering had been rejected. It was never about the box. It was about the act, the transgression. And then the creature moved. It wasn't a step or a glide. It was an explosion, a blur of black limbs and silent, impossible speed. It crossed the last few feet of hallway in a fraction of a second, a silent missile of retribution. The technician had no time to scream, no time to even process the mistake he had just made. The thing's long, spidery fingers closed around his throat. It didn't stop in the elevator. Its momentum carried it forward, dragging the technician with it. He was lifted off his feet, his legs kicking uselessly in the air, his hands clawing at the unyielding fingers around his neck. It didn't slow down. It shot across the hall, a dark comet with a human tail. It was heading for the source, for apartment 1108. The door, already splintered and hanging from a single hinge, gave way completely as the creature slammed into it, dragging its prize inside. The door frame splintered. The ruined door swung shut with a deafening final slam. They were gone. But the sound wasn't. From behind the closed door, we heard it. A single piercing scream of pure agony from the technician, cut off abruptly into a wet, gurgling choke. Then came other sounds. A rapid series of thuds, wet, tearing noises, the distinct, sickening crack of a large bone snapping. Another, and another. It was a symphony of deconstruction, and through it all, faint but clear, was that dry, scraping chuckle. Continuous. Mirthful. Sarah was sobbing in the corner of the elevator, her hands over her ears, her entire body shaking. Lynn was still on the floor near me, her face buried in her arms, her shoulders heaving. I just stood there, frozen. My mind was a blank slate of white noise. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only listen to the sounds of a man being taken apart. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. A deep, profound silence fell over the hallway, the kind of silence that feels louder than any scream. Sarah's sobs quieted to whimpers. Lynn didn't move. The world held its breath. The door to 1108 remained closed. Nothing emerged. My eyes fell to the floor in the middle of the hallway, to the small, dark object lying on the ugly patterned carpet. The music box. And in the dead, listening silence, a new sound began. It was faint at first. A tiny, metallic plinking. Then it grew stronger. A slow, haunting, out-of-tune melody. Tinny and sweet. A child's lullaby, playing all by itself in the empty, silent hall. The melody was a disease. It seeped into the dead air of the hallway, a tinny, out-of-tune lullaby that scraped at the inside of my skull. It came from the box on the floor. The small, dark box. My eyes were locked on it. I couldn't look away. I couldn't process the sounds that had just come from apartment 1108. The wet tearing. The cracking of bone. My brain refused. It chose the music. A broken tune for a broken man. Lynn was a crumpled shape beside me, her breath a series of tiny, hitched gasps. Beside her, Sarah, the architect of this whole nightmare, was a ghost in the elevator. Her face was slack, her eyes wide and blank. The Ice Queen had melted. All her control, her clinical detachment, it was all gone. Burned away by a reality far worse than any fiction she could have engineered. The music box just kept playing, a slow, methodical plinking. Each note was a tiny glass shard dropping into the silence. "We have to go," Sarah whispered. Her voice was not her own. It was a raw, frayed thing. "Now, we have to get out of here." "Go." The word hit me like a physical blow. Yes, go. My legs felt like they were filled with concrete. I reached down, my hand clumsy, and touched Lynn's shoulder. She flinched, a full-body jolt, as if my touch was an electric shock. "Lynn, we're leaving." She didn't look up. She shook her head, burying her face deeper into her knees. "Come on," I urged, my voice cracking. I pulled at her arm, harder this time. "We have to use the stairs." The elevator was a cage. An open trap. Staying here was not an option. Slowly, like an old woman, Lynn got to her feet. Sarah stumbled out of the elevator, her hand pressed to her mouth. We moved as one. 3 broken people, shuffling backward toward the stairwell door at the far end of the hall. Our eyes never left 2 things, the music box playing its dreadful little song, and the splintered door of apartment 1108. The music stopped. The sudden absence of the sound was worse than the sound itself. It left a vacuum, a ringing stillness that screamed a question. What now? Creak. We all froze. The sound was soft, wood on wood. It came from the door. Apartment 1108. It hadn't moved. The creature had slammed it shut. But now it was opening again, inch by agonizing inch. A dark vertical slit widening in the wall. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I shoved Lynn behind me. Sarah let out a thin, strangled whimper. We stared, paralyzed, waiting for the faceless thing to step out again. But nothing came out. The door stopped moving, left open just a crack. Not enough to see in, just enough to know something could come out. Then we saw it. A mark appeared on the inside of the door. A handprint. It was dark, wet and shining in the dim hallway light. It pressed flat against the wood. 5 distinct fingers. It was thick, with fresh blood. And then it moved. It didn't lift off. It slid. A slow, gruesome drag down the face of the door, leaving a thick, glistening smear in its wake. Down, 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 until it disappeared below the line of sight from the crack. A final, painted scream from the man inside. He was gone. This was his receipt. My stomach heaved. Bile rose in my throat. This wasn't just a killing. It was a message, a display. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The buzz was so violent, so out of place, I almost screamed. I looked at Lynn. Her eyes were wide. She was fumbling for her own phone. Sarah jumped, staring down at her jacket. All 3 of us. At the exact same time. I pulled my phone out. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. The screen was lit up. There was a notification, no sender, no number, just an icon. A media file. An audio clip. Play. MP3. I didn't want to listen. I knew what it would be. I made a move to shut the screen off, to throw the phone down the hall. It was too late. A sharp burst of static crackled from the ceiling. We all looked up. The small, round speaker of the building's public address system, a thing I'd never even noticed before, was active. Another crackle. And then a voice. It was the technician. "Please, I gave it back. I gave it back to you," he was screaming. His voice was high and thin with animal terror. There was a scuffling sound in the background. A wet, dragging noise. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what it was. Just a box. It was just a box." Then another sound cut through his pleas, that dry, scraping chuckle. It was quiet, almost gentle, but it filled the speaker, filled the hallway, filled my head. It was the sound of a spider enjoying its meal. "What do you want?" the technician shrieked. "What more do you want?" The chuckling continued, steady and amused. "No! Get it away from me! Get it!" Snap. The sound was clean, unmistakable, like a thick, dry branch being broken over a knee. It was followed by a single wet gurgle. Then silence. The broadcast was over. The silence lasted for a single, long heartbeat. Then a loud clunk echoed from down the hall. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, and died. Total, absolute darkness. I couldn't see anything. Not the walls, not my own hand in front of my face. It was a physical blackness, a heavy blanket thrown over the world. The only sound was my own ragged breath, and Lynn's sharp, terrified gasp right next to my ear. Sarah was somewhere to my left. I could hear her start to openly, hysterically sob. "Shut up," I hissed into the dark, the words coming out harsher than I intended. "Be quiet." Her sobbing choked off into a series of frantic, muffled whimpers. We were blind, trapped on the 11th floor. The thing was in the hall. The stairs were our only way out, but they were at the other end of this black tunnel, past the door to 1108. My ears strained, trying to parse every tiny sound. The hum of the building was gone. The city noise from outside was gone. There was only our breathing, and the frantic pounding of my own blood. Then, a new sound. It came from the direction of 1108. A soft, wet shh. The sound of something heavy and limp being dragged across the carpet. It was slow, deliberate. It was coming out of the room. My blood ran cold. I grabbed Lynn's arm, my fingers digging into her flesh. She was trembling uncontrollably. I began to back away, pulling her with me, one blind, clumsy step at a time. The sobbing from Sarah's direction told me she was doing the same. We were a herd of blind animals, retreating from the unseen predator. The dragging sound continued. Shh, shh, getting closer. Then a second sound joined it. Thump, a pause, thump. It was a different weight, a different rhythm. Not a drag, a step. But it was wrong, heavy, uncoordinated. The sound of a foot being lifted and dropped. Not walking, being walked. Shh, thump, shh, thump. Two sets of footsteps. One was a glide. The other was a dead weight being forced to move. My mind struggled to make sense of it. The creature. And the technician. It was bringing him with it. Lynn must have realized it at the same moment. Her breath hitched. A tiny, broken sound escaped her lips in the suffocating dark. "No," she whispered, her voice a thread of pure horror. Not just one. We stopped moving. We couldn't go forward. We couldn't go back. We just stood there, huddled together in the black, listening to the two sets of footsteps approaching, the soft drag of the creature, and the heavy, puppet-like stomp of its prize. They were getting closer, so close I could almost feel the air move. And then a light appeared. It wasn't a flicker. It was a soft, steady glow from the middle of the hallway, low to the ground. My eyes, now accustomed to the black, locked onto it instantly. It was a pale, sickly green light, and it was coming from the music box. The lid was open. The light pulsed gently, illuminating a small circle of the patterned carpet. The dragging stopped. The thumping stopped. All sound ceased. The entire world was holding its breath, waiting. In the small pool of eerie light, the box sat open. The melody didn't play. But something inside was moving. I squinted, my heart seizing in my chest. It wasn't a porcelain ballerina turning on the pedestal. It was a small figure. A tiny doll, about 3 inches high. It was turning in a slow, perfect circle, illuminated from within. It was wearing a tiny, perfectly rendered blue work vest and miniature khaki pants. Its head was lolled to one side at an impossible angle, its neck clearly broken. It was the technician. A perfect, tiny, dead replica, spinning endlessly in the green glow. A trophy on a music box pedestal, turning for an audience of a cowering few in the endless, waiting dark. The green light from the music box was a disease on the darkness. It didn't illuminate, it stained, a small putrid circle on the carpet, and in its center, the tiny, spinning effigy of a dead man. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. From him! The perfect little blue vest, the head lolled at that broken angle. A trophy. Shh! Thump! The sound was closer now. Much closer. We were a frozen knot of terror in the vast black of the hallway. Me, Lynn, Sarah. 3 statues carved from fear. My hand was clamped around Lynn's bicep, my knuckles white. I could feel the violent tremor running through her entire body. To my left, Sarah's whimpering had become a constant, thin thread of sound, like air leaking from a punctured tire. Shh! Thump. The soft, wet sliding was the main thing. The sound of a heavy sack of wet meat being dragged over the carpet. The sound of the creature. The thump was its counterpoint. A bare foot, heavy, clumsy, uncoordinated, being lifted and dropped onto the floor. The sound of the puppet, the technician. It was walking him, making him walk. My mind refused the logic, but accepted the horror. 2 sets of footsteps. 1 predator, 1 prize. We didn't move. Where was there to go? Forward was toward the sound. Toward the open maw of apartment 1108. Backward was the stairwell. An unknown distance away, down a blacker-than-black tunnel. Trapped. We were trapped. Every survival instinct screamed run, but my feet were bolted to the floor. Run where? Into a wall? Over the edge of the stairwell? We were blind. It was not. My gaze flickered up from the hypnotic green glow of the box. I looked down the hall, past the approaching horror, toward the stairwell door, and past that. Up. I looked up instinctively, toward the floor above. My floor. My apartment. 1208. And I saw it. It wasn't a light. Not really. It was a lack of total darkness. A faint, almost imperceptible softening of the black, bleeding from under my apartment door. A weak, pale blue luminance. So faint it was more a memory of light than light itself. Michael. My brother's spirit. He wasn't gone. He hadn't been snuffed out by this thing. He was still there. Hiding. Waiting. The thought hit me not with relief, but with a fresh spike of ice-cold dread. The light was weak. Fading. He was fading. This thing, this presence in the hall, it was poison. It was leeching the life out of everything, even the echoes of the dead. I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for his. Shh. Thump. The sounds stopped. They didn't fade. They just ceased. Directly in front of us. So close I felt the air shift. My breath caught in my throat, a dry click. The world was silent, save for Sarah's pathetic mewling, and the jackhammer beat of my own heart against my ribs. The green light from the music box suddenly widened, as if a lens had been adjusted. It cast its sickly glow upward, painting the scene before us. 2 figures. The first was tall and gaunt, a silhouette of impossible angles, wrapped in what looked like old stained shrouds. It had no face. Just a smooth, pale expanse of skin where features should have been. It was the thing that had taken the man in 1108. It stood perfectly still, a statue of pure malice. Beside it, held up by a single, unnaturally long arm looped under his shoulder, was the technician. His feet were bare and dirty. His blue work vest was torn. His head hung forward, chin on his chest. He was a marionette with its strings cut. Then the creature moved its other hand. It placed it under the technician's chin and tilted his head up into the green light. His eyes were wide open. They were solid white, opaque, like 2 boiled eggs pressed into his skull. But it was his mouth that broke me. It was stretched into a wide, impossibly taut grin, the same grin as the doll in the music box, a rictus of silent, unending ecstasy. He was dead. He was a corpse. But the thing was still using him, still making him smile. My stomach churned. This wasn't just killing. It was desecration. It was collection. The faceless thing let the technician's head loll forward again. Its own head, that smooth, awful blankness, tilted. It was looking at us, sizing us up. The air grew heavy, thick with a pressure that felt like it could crack stone. It was deciding. Lynn's fingers dug into my arm, her nails breaking the skin. "Numb," she breathed. "A prayer." The creature's arm, the one not holding up its new puppet, rose slowly. It was a spider's leg unfurling. The hand was a collection of long, bony fingers that ended in dirty, cracked nails. It moved through the air with a horrifying grace. And it pointed. It pointed past me. Past Lynn. It pointed directly at Sarah. The architect. The one who had brought us here. The Ice Queen whose clinical curiosity had led us into this slaughterhouse. Her whimpering stopped, instantly, choked off by a sudden, sharp intake of breath. She knew. We all knew. She was next. A switch inside my head flipped. The fear didn't vanish. It turned into something else. Something hot. Something reckless. The image of Michael's fading light flared in my mind. The image of the man from 1108, his hand sliding down the door in a smear of blood. The image of this smiling dead puppet. No, not again. Not her. Not anyone else. No! The word ripped out of my throat, raw and loud in the silent hall. It surprised me as much as it did anyone else. The creature's head tilted slightly, the pointing finger remaining locked on Sarah. It was curious. Not her, I snarled, taking a single clumsy step forward, putting myself between the thing and the two women. My body screamed at me to stop, to run, to curl up and die, but my feet kept moving. You want someone? Is that it? You want a new toy for your box? I stared directly at the blank space where its eyes should be. I could feel its attention shift, a tangible weight settling onto me. Take me, I said, my voice shaking but firm. It's me. I'm the one you want. I was babbling. Insane words born of sheer terror. But I couldn't stop them. It was a negotiation with a nightmare. The creature didn't move. The finger didn't waver. It was going to take her, and I was going to watch, and then it would take Lynn, and then it would come for me. The collection. My eyes darted down to the floor, to the pool of green light, to the box. The source, the anchor, the engine of this hell. In that split second, there was no thought, only action. A pure, animalistic impulse. I lunged forward, not at the creature, but at the light. I dove, my hands outstretched, ignoring the primal scream in my skull that told me I was touching something unholy. My fingers closed around the cheap, splintery wood of the music box. It was cold, a deep, unnatural cold that burned. With a guttural roar, I lifted it high over my head and brought it down with every ounce of strength I had. Crash! The sound was explosive. A sharp crack of wood splintering, followed by the discordant, dying twang of a metal mechanism being destroyed. The green light vanished, plunging the hallway back into absolute, suffocating darkness. The melody stopped. The engine was broken. A sound tore through the black. It wasn't human. It was a high, piercing shriek of fury and pain, a sound that scraped the inside of my bones. It was the creature. It was enraged. A heavy thump sounded right beside me as the technician's body, its strings finally cut for good, collapsed to the floor in a heap. For a single fleeting heartbeat, I felt a surge of triumph. I did it. I broke it. The shriek cut off. Silence fell once more, a heavy, waiting silence. I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Then, from the dark, from the direction of apartment 1108, came a sound. A soft click. Then another, and another, a series of small, sharp sounds, multiplying in the black. And then the lights appeared. Not one. Dozens. Tiny twin points of malevolent red light, switching on in the darkness. They weren't just in the doorway of 1108. They were coming from inside, filling the space. A swarm of glowing red eyes. They blinked slowly, in unison, a silent chorus of observers awakened by the noise. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. My breath hitched, and I understood. The music box wasn't the anchor. It was a leash. The shriek wasn't a roar of defeat. It was a summons. I hadn't killed it. I had just let the rest of them out to play. We had never been dealing with a monster. We were dealing with a family. The red eyes blinked. All of them. At once. A wave of crimson shutters opening and closing in the dark. My triumph dissolved into a cold, chemical dread that flooded my veins. They weren't just in the doorway of 1108. They were the doorway. They filled it, a writhing, shifting mass of things that were almost human. From the churning darkness, a shape detached itself. Then another. And another. They began to spill into the hallway, a tide of wrongness. They didn't walk. They moved with a dry, skittering sound, like dead leaves skidding across pavement, the sound of 100 insects, the weight of 100 bodies. Leah screamed. It wasn't a word, just a pure, high sound of a mind breaking. She crumpled to the floor, her hands over her head. Beside her, Sarah went silent, a statue of disbelief, her face a white mask in the faint, residual light from the stairwell. Useless. We were all useless. Run. The thought was a useless spark in the storm of my panic. Run where? The stairwell was behind us, but the tide was flowing our way. They were between us and the only way out. They moved slowly, with a shared, unhurried purpose. Spreading out, fanning across the hall, taking their time. They knew the layout. They knew the exits. They knew we were trapped. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a wild animal trying to beat its way out. The red eyes fixed on us. Dozens of pairs. Assessing. Curious. Hungry. Then something shifted in my head. A wire snapped. The panic didn't go away. It collapsed inward, hardening into a single, insane point of clarity. My apartment. 1208. The pale blue light I had seen from under the door. Michael. He was still there. Fading. Alone. I wasn't going to die in a hallway. Not here. Not while he waited. I turned my back on the approaching wave of red eyes. Nate, what are you doing? Leah's shriek ripped through the air, laced with a new kind of terror. The terror of being abandoned. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words weren't there. There was only the destination. One foot in front of the other. I walked past Leah's sobbing form, past Sarah's frozen horror. I walked toward the stairwell, my steps heavy and loud in the clicking silence. The creatures in the hall paused. The skittering sound lessened. The red eyes all swiveled, tracking my impossible movement. They were confused. Prey didn't walk toward the hunter. I reached the stairwell. I didn't go down. I put my hand on the cold metal rail and started to climb. Up. Toward my floor. Toward home. Darkness swallowed me as I left the dim light of the hallway below. Each step was a cannon shot in the quiet. I didn't look back. I knew what I would see. A sea of red, watching me go, letting me go. I reached the 12th floor. The hallway here was just as dark, but it was a different kind. An empty dark. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped them. The jingle of metal was an obscenity. Finally, the key slid into the lock. It turned with a loud click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The darkness in my apartment was soft. A deep, quiet black. And in the corner, by the window that looked out onto the dead city, was a flicker of pale blue. So faint it was barely there. A heat mirage of a ghost. It was Michael. He was huddled into a ball, his knees drawn to his chest. He was almost completely transparent. I could see the outline of the armchair, the bookshelf, the whole world right through him. He was a whisper of a memory, and he was fading fast. The things from the hall hadn't followed me up. Not yet. But I could feel them. A pressure building outside my door. a gathering of intent. They were hesitant. This place was different. This place was mine. I closed the door, the latch clicking shut with a sound of finality. "I'm sorry," I whispered into the dark. The words were gravel in my throat. My gaze was locked on the fading blue shape in the corner. "Mikey." "I'm so sorry I left you." The spirit's head lifted. The form wavered, but I could make out a face turning toward me. There were no features, just an impression of a sad, lost child. His light flickered, as if my voice was a breeze threatening to extinguish his flame. Scrape. Thump. A sound from outside the door. They were here, just on the other side of the wood. The pressure intensified. They were testing the boundary. I couldn't fight them. There were too many. I couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. My eyes darted around the dark room, my room, the last piece of my life. My gaze fell on the small table next to the sofa, on the single picture frame standing there. An idea, cold and sharp and terrible, pierced through the fear. A final, desperate bargain. I turned back to the door. I could feel their presence, a collective malevolence pushing against the thin wood. I could hear their soft, dry movements on the other side. "My house," I said, my voice low but steady. It didn't feel like my voice. "My rules." My legs moved on their own. I crossed the room to the small table and picked up the picture frame. My fingers traced the cheap silver plating. It was the only photo I had of all four of us. Mom, Dad, a grinning 10-year-old me with a missing tooth, and a baby Michael in my mom's arms, his face a round, perfect moon. A lifetime ago. A different universe. Scrap. Click, click. They were getting impatient. I walked back toward the door, the photo held tight in my hand. In my other hand, my fingers found the cold, rectangular shape of the lighter I always kept in my pocket. "You want a soul?" I spoke to the door, to the things behind it. My thumb found the ridged wheel of the lighter. "Is that it?" "You collect them." I could feel Michael's faint presence behind me, a question mark of cold air. "Then take one," I snarled, a sudden hot rage burning through me. "Take a soul that's ready to go." Flick. The sound was shockingly loud. A tiny star of orange fire bloomed in the darkness, throwing my shadow, huge and monstrous, against the wall. The flame illuminated the faces in the photograph. My mother's smile, my father's tired eyes, my own stupid, happy grin, and Michael safe in his mother's arms. I touched the corner of the photograph to the flame. It resisted for a second, then the edge curled, turning black. The fire caught. It ate my father's face first, then my mother's. The plastic sheet over the photo bubbled and melted. I watched the flame consume my own childhood face, leaving nothing but black ash. Behind me, the weak blue light in the corner brightened just for a second. It flared with a sudden, impossible warmth. I glanced back. The huddled shape was gone. In its place stood the translucent form of a small boy. And he was smiling. A real smile. A smile of release. Then he dissolved into 1,000 motes of soft blue light that drifted through the air and vanished. He was free. At the exact same moment, a sound ripped through the apartment. Not a sound of wood or metal, but of tearing reality. A violent whoosh! A wall of brilliant, silent, blue fire erupted into existence, tracing the entire frame of my apartment door. It didn't burn the wood. It didn't produce heat. It was a cold, spectral flame, a shimmering barrier of impossible energy. From the other side, a collective shriek of frustration and rage echoed down the hall. I saw their shapes through the translucent fire. Twisted, gaunt figures, clawed hands batting at the blue flames, pulling back as if burned. The sea of red eyes stared through the barrier, filled with a new, undiluted hatred. They were locked out. I had done it. I had traded my past for our present. My atonement had become a shield. I sank to my knees, the hot, melted plastic of the empty picture frame falling from my fingers and clattering to the floor. I stared at the blue fire, the only thing between me and them. But I saw the way it flickered. I saw how it wavered where their rage was most focused. I knew. It wouldn't hold them for long. The blue fire sputtered. It was dying. a guttering candle in a hurricane. Each flicker was weaker than the last, the brilliant sapphire wall thinning into a pale, translucent film. The rage from the hallway grew louder, a chorus of dry hisses and clicks, the sound of anticipation. They knew. They were waiting. My shield, my one desperate act of bargaining, was dissolving. Time wasn't slowing down. It was gone. There was only now, and what was coming next. My gaze snapped down the hall toward the stairwell. I could just make out their shapes in the dim light. Two crumpled forms on the dirty linoleum. Leah and Sarah, frozen, useless. They were going to die here. The thought was a blade in my gut. I had saved Michael, but I had just bought these two a few more seconds of terror. A new kind of panic, sharp and selfless, cut through my exhaustion. I scrambled to my feet, my knees screaming in protest. "Run!" I croaked. My voice was a useless noise, swallowed by the growing hiss from outside. I cleared my throat, forcing air from my lungs. "Run!" The shout echoed in the narrow space. It hit them like a physical blow. I saw Leah's head jerk up. Sarah. No, it was the other one. Lynn, the one who had been with her, moved first. She grabbed Sarah's arm, hauling her to her feet with a strength born of pure adrenaline. Sarah was dead weight, her face a blank mask of shock. "Nate!" Leah's voice was a thin, broken thing. She was on her feet now, but she took a step toward me. Toward the dying blue fire. The hissing from the other side of the door intensified into a guttural, collective groan. A hungry sound. The fire flickered violently, showing me their silhouettes for a half-second, a forest of twisted limbs and sharp angles pressing against the barrier. They were almost through. "Go!" I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that tore from my throat. "Get out, now!" That broke the spell. Leah turned, stumbling over her own feet as she and Lynn half-dragged, half-carried Sarah toward the heavy steel door of the stairwell. Sarah looked back over her shoulder, just for a second. Her face, streaked with tears, was a portrait of utter incomprehension. Her eyes met mine. They weren't asking a question. They were saying goodbye. Then they were gone, the stairwell door slamming shut, with a deafening boom that was immediately followed by silence. A new kind of silence. The hungry groans from the hallway stopped. The blue fire went out. It didn't fade. It vanished. One moment it was there, a thin sheet of light. The next, nothing. The latch on my door clicked with a soft, final sound. Darkness poured into the room, a physical presence, thick and cold. It smelled of dust and old cellars and something else. Something like rotting meat left in the sun. The red eyes filled the doorway. A sea of them. Unblinking, they flowed inside. It wasn't a rush, it was a tide. They didn't stomp or run. They skittered, their limbs moving with a dry, clicking sound that filled the room. The sound of 1,000 cockroaches spilling from a drainpipe. They moved with a shared mind, fanning out, their gaunt forms slipping through the shadows, silent except for that awful, constant clicking. I didn't move. I didn't back away. There was nowhere to go. My back was against the wall by the window. I had made my choice. I had freed Michael. I had sent the others away. This was the cost. This was the bill, come due. I closed my eyes. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic prisoner. Cold sweat trickled down my spine. I could hear them getting closer. The clicking was all around me now. I could feel the air shifting as they moved past me, surrounding me. I braced for the touch. The tearing. The end. "I am sorry, Mikey. I am so sore." Nothing. The clicking stopped. The air grew still. The oppressive weight of their presence remained, but it was a waiting presence, not an attacking one. Seconds stretched into an eternity. My lungs burned for air, but I refused to breathe. I refused to give them the satisfaction. I waited. And waited. Slowly, against every survival instinct screaming in my skull, I opened my eyes. They were all there. A silent, waiting crowd of stick-figure horrors filling my small apartment. They weren't looking at the furniture. They weren't looking at the door. They were all looking at me. From the center of the mass, one of them detached itself and glided forward. It was taller than the others, its form less distinct, as if it were made of solidified shadow. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, blank surface. A void. It stopped right in front of me, so close I could feel a strange cold radiating from it. It tilted its head, an inquisitive bird-like gesture that was terrifyingly, almost comically, human. My breath hitched. My entire body was rigid, a statue of fear. It raised a hand. The fingers were long and thin, like polished bone. They moved with an unnatural grace, reaching for me. I flinched, my eyes screwing shut again. I couldn't watch. This was it. This was the real end. A single fingertip, colder than ice, colder than anything I had ever felt, touched the center of my chest, right over my heart. It wasn't a push. There was no pain. It was a feeling of removal. A sudden, cavernous emptiness opened up inside me. It felt like a plug had been pulled at the bottom of my soul, and everything that made me me, the fear, the grief for Michael, the love for my parents, the lingering terror, all of it, was draining away into that single point of contact. A hollow ache spread through my chest, cold and vast. The touch lasted only a moment. Then it was gone. I opened my eyes. The faceless thing was looking at its own fingertip, as if inspecting what it had taken. Then it turned. Without a sound, it glided back into the waiting mass of creatures. And then, as one, they all turned their backs on me. They began to move, a silent, orderly procession. The skittering, clicking sound was gone. They flowed out of my apartment, a river of darkness pouring back into the hallway. They turned and moved down the hall, their red eyes fading with distance. They didn't look back. They flowed, all of them, into the open doorway of apartment 1108. The last one slipped inside. The door swung shut with a quiet, definitive click, and they were gone. I was alone. I slid down the wall, my legs giving out, and landed in a heap on the floor. My hand went to my chest. I could feel my own heartbeat, slow and steady. Too steady. I was breathing. I was alive. Completely impossibly alive. What just happened? The question was a faint echo in the new, quiet space in my head. The stairwell door creaked open. Leah's head peeked around the frame, followed by Lynn's. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Nate?" Leah whispered. They're gone?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was staring at my own hands, turning them over and over. They looked the same. My hands. They crept back into the hallway, looking left and right, their bodies coiled, ready to bolt. "What happened?" Lynn asked, her voice shaking. "Where did they go?" "I don't know," I heard myself say. The voice was mine, but it felt distant, like it was coming from the other side of a room. I pushed myself up, using the wall for support. The cold emptiness inside me was still there, a permanent fixture, a hole carved out of my center. I felt calm, too calm. I took a step, then another. My legs felt steady. I walked out of my apartment, into the hallway. The girls flinched back as I approached, their eyes searching mine for an answer I didn't have. My gaze fell on the polished metal of the elevator doors. They were scuffed and grimy, but they still held a distorted reflection. I saw the hallway. I saw the two terrified girls, and I saw the man standing between them. Me. I stared at the reflection, and the reflection stared back. The person wearing my clothes, my face, was me, but the eyes were wrong. They weren't my eyes anymore. They were gone. In their place were two flat, milky white orbs, devoid of light, devoid of life. And then I watched, a helpless passenger inside my own skull, as my mouth began to move. My lips pulled back from my teeth, and back, and back. They stretched impossibly wide, the corners of my mouth crinkling up toward my ears, splitting my face into a grotesque, ecstatic, silent grin. A tiny, terrified part of me, the part they hadn't drained away, screamed. But no sound came out. I was just the audience now. The cold void in my chest pulsed, a faint, rhythmic beat. The grin on my face widened. My house. My rules.